Good evening. We will go ahead and call the meeting to order. Tim May will be joining us and running the meeting later on this evening. There is a road show for the JPA that is going on right now at Petaluma, and then they will be coming and presenting here, and Tim will be taking over at that time. So I'm filling in for him until he gets here later on this evening. Okay? So, are there any announcements from any of the commissioners? Elena, any announcements from you? Okay. Any of the others? Okay. I have one item that I would like to clarify at this time using this announcement time, and that is an item that will be on the agenda later on this evening, but I know that based on a lot of emails and communication that I've seen and that have been going around, I think there is some misunderstanding on this particular topic. So I want to just clarify it up front, and then we will have, of course, the full appropriate discussion when we get to it on the agenda. And that is the item regarding the commission hiring or authorizing Sandy Cooper back for a specific purpose. So I just want to make this really clear because I know there's a lot of misinformation in the general community on this. The commission is not considering hiring Sandy Cooper back as extra help in the general sense, but for a very specific and limited purpose, which is we are currently scheduled to go through fact-finding with the union, and that the fact-finding process does involve certain incidents and issues which Ms. Cooper may have the most knowledge, or her assistance may become necessary, or we may need to have her testify. Under that circumstance, we will need to pay her for her time, and that is the item that you see on the agenda. It is a very specific purpose. We estimate that that fact-finding process, it is not going to be more than 20 to 40 hours at most, and that's probably on the high end. And there is the hopeful possibility that we will come to an agreement with the union and won't even have to go through a fact-finding process, in which case we obviously wouldn't need Ms. Cooper's hours at all. So I just want to clarify that situation because I can really understand the way that the materials appeared on the agenda. There were a lot of folks who got the impression we were talking about hiring Ms. Cooper for 900 hours or some such thing, or for a more general purpose. So this is really an authorization that allows us to address a very narrow and very specific issue, which may, in the end, not even be necessary. So I just wanted to clarify that, and now let's move on to the agenda. The first area then is public appearances for those who would wish to address the commission on something that is not on today's agenda. Thank you.
Everybody, you all know me, I'm Carrie. The big challenge I have with the setups for the commission meetings every month is this equipment is barely hanging in for me. The microphones are getting harder and harder to set up. I've looked at some different options, and when I heard that there were going to be up to 12 commissioners, my first thought was, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with microphones? I didn't care about anything else, but me, all about me. And so I looked at some different options. And with all of the new commissioners, plus we'll have a director microphone, plus the CFO, a guest person, that's plus one spare just for whatever. That's 16 microphones. In May, I got a quote for just 8 at that point. And that was almost $14,000. So I'm looking at, if I have to get this room done, then we're looking at almost $28,000. So I think there are other options that could be explored, like the city chamber. So I definitely want to say, I know it's coming up on an agenda, I think next month, but really have to think about that because $28,000 is a little too much. So, there you go.
Thank you for your comments. Very, very good input. Thank you. Other topics not on today's agenda? Okay. Library advisory boards. This is the point on the agenda. If anyone from any of our labs would like to speak, please step forward. Okay. We now have a special report from regarding the Sonoma County History and Genealogy Library, and I'd like to ask our librarian, Tony Hoskins, to come up.
Hello. I guess I launch in, do I? Okay.
Jump right in there.
I'm Tony Hoskins. I am the History and Genealogy Librarian and the Sonoma County Archivist for the library, and I am starting my 12th year this month. Very, very pleased to be here and to chat with you a bit about what we do. The Sonoma County History Library started actually in one room in this library in the late 60s. It was called the California Room. And in about 1997, it moved next door to the building currently known as the Annex, where we've been ever since. And our customers basically fall into two types. They're local historians or they're genealogists generally. There are some who do both, but generally they're one or the other. We are sort of equally busy with both types of readers. Interesting genesis of the library, really, of the history component, the California Room, was very, very marvelous, public-spirited people who came from the community to do a lot of volunteer work in the early days to get this started. And we're everlastingly grateful for the things that they've done. Some of our greatest treasures have been given to us by our volunteers, and we currently have a really splendid cadre. The services, we are open 28 hours a week. We're open, the hours of the library itself are Wednesday through Saturday, 10 to 6. And the staff is myself and Catherine Reinhardt. And the services we provide are consultative very largely. They're instructive. Catherine and I both particularly enjoy a kind of mission of teaching. Catherine has marvelous skills of local historical sort of property history tracing, which is more and more popular and very much in demand, and our collection is very rich for that. My own is sort of general history, but especially genealogy, and that is an ever-growing subject of interest to many, many people. And so between those two areas, we keep very, very busy. Under the rubric of services, I might just say a word or two about what we have vis-a-vis collection. We estimate we have something like 8,000 volumes of both local history and genealogy. The local history tends to be Sonoma County centric, but in the 12 years I've been here, we've had a conscious effort to widen our scope slightly, first with the contiguous counties, and then eventually it struck me that we really needed to have a richer collection statewide, because especially for those of us who've worked in the early Spanish days, you find that there is such commonality genealogically and commercially and everything between the earliest Californians in San Diego and even up here. So we've broadened the local historical to really cover California. But again, the tendency will be that you'll see the collection is richer the closer to Sonoma County. We have also a very rich collection, and this is extremely important for local history and for people doing local genealogical research, of newspapers. We have the Santa Rosa Press-Democrat in its various incarnations from October 1857 through the end of 1969. And this is used constantly and very effectively. We also have a good run of Petaluma newspapers, not the older ones, which are in the Petaluma History Room, but of more recent Petaluma newspapers. And recently we have gained also the Sebastopol and Sonoma, town of Sonoma's newspapers as well. And these microfilms of newspapers, none of which is digitized currently, are very, very important resources for historical and for local genealogical research. We have become involved in the last few years with the heritage collections, which are digitized materials. Other people are participants in the Sonoma County Library heritage collections, the Wine Library and the Petaluma History Room as well. Some of our challenges I was asked to mention. Space. I was talking to Jamie and David about this. We have one of our rooms in the History Library is called our Rare Book Room. And we've been having so many new, very important additions to our Rare Book Room, many of which are somewhat bulky because of the packaging that's necessary for these fragile materials. So we're currently really strapped for space. Down the road, as far as challenges go, I would have to say we're thinking in terms of gaining additional money somewhere there are some digitization projects that are very dear to our hearts. For me personally, the most important would be to get the Sonoma County wills, which we hold, the originals, from 1849 to 1893, to get those digitized would be of the first importance. And also last year we had a real acquisition, the Sonoma County Herald Recorder newspaper, which had been published since the 1890s and ceased publication last year in 2012, had a complete run from 1905 through 2012, and they had no place to put it, and fortunately we were able to put it in the archives, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the thing that we would like to do with this, it's a huge run. It's a weekly newspaper that ran, and it's apparently, we haven't confirmed it, but we do think it's absolutely complete from 1905 through 2012, which is incredible. It has never been filmed. This is the only complete run, we're pretty sure, that exists anywhere. So a real challenge that we would be very, very much like to accomplish would be to eventually see that digitized. Let's see. And about the archives, when I took this job 12 years ago, one of the things that so attracted me to it was that I learned that this library had devoted itself to a mission that I had previously thought, I'm from the Midwest originally, that I had originally thought no public library had done that I had known of, which is to combine its function of public library, county library, with making itself in one fashion or another the repository of the early primary documents of that county. And that really attracted me to this job. And it's a treasure, an absolute treasure of this library system. It really, really is. It was the Sonoma County Archives, and one of my handouts is just the founding document of that from 1965. It was set up by the county, and with the cooperation of the library, with a clear understanding that the Sonoma County Library would serve as the Sonoma County Archives. Effectively, what happened subsequent to that was that the Sonoma County Clerk's Office got an idea to establish something called the Sonoma County Historical Records Commission, whereby there are 5 historical records commissioners. One of them is always myself in lieu of the director, but in the entire history of the Historical Records Commission so far, it has only been held by the history librarian. The other 4 are appointed, and they run for 2-year terms. And currently we have Dan Marquin, who's Emeritus Professor of History, Sonoma State. We have a surveyor, we have local historians, we have Eric Stanley, who's Curator of History at the Sonoma County Museum. The point of the Historical Records Commission, as conceived and as it has actually worked out, is that there are nearly monthly meetings whereby proposed items for archival consideration are brought forward, and the commissioners decide whether these are germane for the Sonoma County Archives or not. And if they are, they will eventually come to the archives. And by come to the archives, what that means is the materials are delivered. We take ownership by means of 2 documents, conditions of transfer and deeds of gift. And once that is done, they will in due course be cataloged by the library. So ultimately, all things that are deemed archival by the Sonoma County Historical Records Commission, once they're delivered to the library and those documents are exchanged, and the process moves ahead and they are cataloged, they become essentially part of the collection, and they will be found in the catalog. And this is a treasure beyond valuation for local historians, because they can combine research in the history library in as comprehensive a run of books as you will find for the local history, with the original documents themselves. And so it's a huge treasure, and very pleased to have it. I've given you also a brochure. This is a new, we had one, I did one years ago, I guess about 8 or 9 years ago, but this is a new one, very nicely done, I think. And see, are there any questions or?
I have one question. The wine library, which, as you know, is located in Healdsburg, there's a treasure trove of history of the wine industry.
Mm-hmm.
What is your relationship, interaction with the wine library?
Well, very cooperative. John Haupt and I have had many talks, and he's doing a very fine job. We don't collect the things that John will be collecting at the wine library. We tend to be very conversant with what is germane for each of us. However, there is some overlap, and I'm glad there is. We have some oral histories were done some years ago of various winemakers in the county, and we have transcripts of many of those. And those are, that kind of thing, the sort of textual thing, having to do with viticulture, or especially people that were in the wine business, that we're very interested in too. But if it comes down to the existence of, say, one thing, John and I would talk it over, and honestly, I'd probably want most of them to be with him, but there would be some difference occasionally on that. Yes.
Yeah, I had a question on the
Sure.
oral history. So is that something that's active, or is that just happen occasionally?
Yeah,
Because I know
oral-
how valuable they can be.
Oh, yeah, they can be very, very valuable. Actually, I might mention something. In the course of my work, I believe that librarians should do outreach in the community. I'm a very big believer in that. And in the 12 years I've been here, I've been president of the Sonoma County Historical Society for about 7 years, and I've been president of the Sonoma County Genealogical Society for about 4 years, and been involved in a lot of other, and sat on the board of trustees of the Sonoma County Museum for about 3 years. In the course of all of that, I've learned a lot about a great variety of people locally who are doing oral histories, and we really encourage it. And we have some good books in our library on how to actually conduct oral histories. And by the way, the Sonoma County Historical Society has recently come across something like 110 taped oral histories of many people who were active in Santa Rosa from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And they are very busily making copies of these things, hoping to get them transcribed. The thing with oral history is the transcription issue is vexed, because if you actually do a physical transcription, it's very, very expensive, very time consuming. But we are a big believer in oral histories.
You mentioned the Herald Recorder, is that
Mhm.
correct? And so you have the whole collection from 1905 to
2012,
2012, and you'd like to see that digitized.
ultimately.
So my question is, how much would that cost?
Yeah.
How long would a project like that take, and how do you go about doing that?
That is yet to be launched into. It's a very good question, and we want to do that. I've had some tentative figures, which I don't have with me, just talking to people on the phone, and it's talking about thousands of dollars, but I don't have a real figure for that. But that would be high on the list. I was hoping ultimately to start off with the Wills as a project, which is, they're so well organized now. We've had volunteers working on them too. And it would be a smaller project, and I thought it would be kind of nice if we can begin on that and then see how that runs. And then there are other possible digitization projects, like I was contacted by a company in Oklahoma who does yearbooks. They do them nationwide. And yearbooks are a huge benefit to local historians. And so and the particular company I'm talking to is quite reasonable. So there may be the digitization of those involved rather cheaply. The price I don't have, but that would be another good project. Any questions or?
Thank you very much.
Sure. Well, thank you so
Very
much. and
informative.
Hope to see you at the library sometime. Thank you.
Okay, let's now move into commission reports. And Julia, should we start with you? Any updates? Let's go around.
The Santa Rosa Lab met sometime in the last few weeks, and I was there. And there was discussion mostly about the joint powers agreement. They had some concerns about the provision that allows for disparity of service if outside resources are provided. And they were also very concerned about having a commission filled with elected officials. They didn't particularly like that idea. Otherwise, not much came out of it. The Friends held their book sale at the Vets Building this weekend. I was there, and they looked like they had a pretty good crowd. I have not heard yet exactly how they did, but they usually do pretty well at those events.
Great.
The Roanoke Park Katati Library Lab will be meeting next Tuesday, so I will report next month.
Okay.
The Windsor Lab meets tomorrow, so we don't have anything from there, but the Healdsburg Lab has had several meetings, and at a meeting on, today is on Thursday, they unanimously adopted a resolution which was presented to the Healdsburg City Council, that the Healdsburg City Council not accept the new lab proposal.
JPA proposal?
I'm sorry, JPA proposal.
What, and did the council?
Council has their meeting tonight. I do not know if it will be voted on tonight because there are three or four other very large items on the agenda, but we expect it will be discussed tonight.
Have they had their roadshow? Has
No.
the JPA been presented to them?
No.
Okay.
Cloverdale had not met since I last reported out on it, so I don't have anything additional. Elena?
Guerneville met last month on September 11th, and there was a lot of really good discussion about both the JPA as well as the agenda item for labs to make presentations. So I think, although we haven't had any labs make presentations the last few months, I think that it is something that will be happening in the near future. The Friends had a book sale at the end of August and made more than $4,000 and now have $50,000 in the bank. They're working on a 501c3 status. In November, the Friends will be sponsoring the 8th Annual Young Writers Awards. It'll be the week before Thanksgiving. So notices have gone out to the schools in their area, so students will submit their writing. There are Readers Theater auditions in November, and that is moving forward very nicely. Let's see. Books from the book sale that weren't used that weren't sold were donated to Juvenile Hall. Sebastopol met last Wednesday, and again there was some good discussion about both the agenda item for labs to come forward, but also we spent a great deal of time talking about the directors, the existing director's job description, and received some input on ideas to make some changes or additions to that. So I'll share that with the committee when we get to that point. The Friends book sale did not do as well this last month. They have talked about how donations are somewhat down from previously, or good quality donations have dropped. So they're not sure if that's what they can attribute that to or not. We've been talking at the Sebastopol Lab a lot about the bylaws for Sebastopol Lab, as well as a lot of discussion about the Brown Act. So I would just suggest that at some point in the near future, we again discuss with county council, to get some more clarification on how the Brown Act applies to library advisory boards, and perhaps schedule, ask to participate in the annual library advisory board get-together to do, overview of the Brown Act as a small portion of the agenda. Thanks. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. In terms of committee reports, Julia, I don't know if you have anything in terms of the joint powers agreement, given we do have a formal presentation later on in the agenda.
We're going to have a formal presentation. We are going to be the fourth of its presentations. It's already been presented to the Board of Supervisors, who gave feedback, to the City of Santa Rosa City Council, who gave their feedback, and tonight it's being presented to the City of Petaluma City Council, and then Don Schwartz, the county staffer who's been presenting, and our own Tim May will be zipping up here to give it to us. So we'll be number 4 in line.
Okay.
They should be pretty good at it by then.
Okay. And Helena, I don't know that we really have anything from the Revenue Committee at this point.
Yeah, without having a CFO, it's been difficult, so, but that's about to change.
Yes, it is. Okay, let's move on to approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, any discussion? Corrections? Okay. Let's see. The first time I've done this, do I need to have public comment on the minutes here? Is there
Yeah, we can.
any public comments on this? All right, in that case, can we have a vote on the minutes? Here, in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Correspondence and press coverage. I don't know if anyone had a chance to review any of this. Take a look, pass them around. Any comments? Okay. I think we are ready to move to the consent calendar in that case. And we have actions by motion. The first one is to adopt the interim.
Is there anything on the consent calendar? Which just happens if we don't ask to move it off? No? Okay, thank you.
I don't believe there's anything on consent, no.
Thank you.
So we're now on 10.1, which is to adopt the interim CFO classification specification and revised salary schedule. And this is, this has to be approved along with, then we have an action to allow former CalPERS agency employee Bruce McConnell to become our interim CFO. So let's start with 10.1, which is the CFO class specification and revised salary schedule. And I will ask our co-directors if there's anything particular we should be aware of regarding this change in the class specification or revised schedule.
The main thing I would highlight is, as it says in the cover memo, we did increase the minimum qualifications to add 10 years of progressively responsible experience in a professional, fiscal, or administrative type of position, and the requirement to hold a bachelor's degree.
Is the rest of this description the same as previously?
The only other change is the removal of the facilities oversight.
And I would mention that it's important to note that this is an interim position class spec. It would not be the class spec that we would then have in place for the permanent CFO position. We would put facilities back in there, for instance. So this is really, some of it was designed specifically to handle the situation we're in now and trying to make the workflow work during this interim period and not put too much on our interim CFO in the way of the facilities management, which is pretty ably handled at this point by our facilities team. So,
And I would assume that the permanent position would be covered in the larger study that we're having done on all of our classifications and salary, but obviously we can't wait for that, and this is a unique interim situation.
right, and we may not be able to wait for the permanent hiring as well for that whole study to be done. We're going to have something in place to hire based upon and before Bruce leaves, and he can only really be here through the end of March. So we got to get moving on the CFO recruitment, which means we'll need to use an existing class spec.
Okay.
Has work begun yet on that classification study?
Yes.
Yes.
It has. Are we starting with this position?
No. We actually asked that they fast-track the director position so that we could get
Okay.
moving on that recruitment. We did not ask them to fast-track the CFO description, but that,
Well,
They're like one,
The first step is for the incumbent in the position to fill out a position
I got it.
description questionnaire,
Sure.
and we don't have an incumbent in the
Right.
CFO position yet.
right. Okay.
So would this individual do that, fill out the form so that they,
Well, we could have
yeah,
that done.
it might help move it along?
I don't know how quickly a person stepping into the position would be able to fully fill out.
Well,
The
and if
question.
pretty
they're,
involved questionnaire.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
about 10
really like,
pages.
yeah, it
And
takes
if
4
they're-
hours to do if you've been doing the job for a while, so.
and if their charge is a little different than
Right.
the permanent position we're looking for, that might not be quite that means you folks will fill it out? How does that work? How will
No, we won't fill it out, but we will consult with our interim CFO to come up with the best consulting way with Coffin Associates to come up with it.
Okay,
Yeah.
and in terms of if we need to not wait for that classification study and just hire, is there something, a procedure in place at this point? Do we have some steps we're going to take to get the permanent position description done and figure out what we're going to start recruiting?
I think part of that depends on your discussion later at this meeting about the director recruitment, because one question we had was if we could fold in the CFO recruitment with the director recruitment and get assistance from a single firm for both
Right.
recruitments.
Okay,
So if the answer to that is no, then we would start making plans on a
Okay.
separate track to get that permanent recruitment underway.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
Sure. Thought I was.
and the other question, I had a couple of questions. The hourly compensation range that you've come up with, is that based on some comps around the Bay Area for this type of position, or where did those numbers come from?
Well,
I'm not sure exactly where those numbers come from, except that I think they are comparable to the position as has been held previously by our candidate as an interim CFO in other positions. So it's kind of industry standard in our area.
Industry standard in libraries or industry standard in?
Governmental.
Governmental.
Yeah.
Okay.
There aren't any libraries to compare to for CFO. Very few libraries actually employ a CFO because most libraries are subsumed under some larger jurisdiction. I don't know where I would go actually to find a comp for a library CFO aside from perhaps Sacramento.
I was going to say, doesn't Sacramento has a joint powers agreement? And
Right,
so-
Sacramento might be the only one that I can think of. All the libraries I've worked in, the financial officer who was in charge was an employee of the city jurisdiction or the county jurisdiction for that library. So we're kind of in a special case here. That's why we're comparing ourselves to other government agencies generally.
Okay. All right, and this particular candidate, though, we know has been working as an interim CFO, I think for the city of Santa Rosa and for other local agencies. So I assume this range came from his work with those other organizations recently.
I believe that's correct. Is that correct? He's nodding, yes.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve? We'll take public comment in just a moment. Is there a motion to move forward on this?
I so move.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. At this point, if there are individuals in the audience who would like to comment on this particular item, please come to our microphone.
Hi, I am Paula DeLuca. I'm your business analyst here at the county. I have a couple of concerns and a few comments on the document before you. Per article, I wrote it down because I want to make sure that I give you my spiel in the time allotted. So per the JPA Article 8, the number of library employees, classification, compensation, wages, hours, and condition of employment shall be subject to approval by the Board of Supervisors. The document before you states that the class specification to be one of interim CFO, parentheses, administrative services manager. The salary schedule does not eliminate the position of administrative services manager. The salary schedule is modified, and the modified salary schedule implies that the position of interim and now is a regular employee of the library. My concern is that, well, my concerns. Why is the position of interim CFO added to the regular employee salary schedule? Why is the interim CFO, who is presently not a library employee, not being paid from the extra help budget, being that interim implies normally something of a temporary nature? Is the fact that the interim CFO position is now a regular class, implying that the library aims to hire a strings of interims? Is the commission planning to seek the Board of Supervisors approval for the new added position, being that the administrative services manager position is not being eliminated? So my suggestions are that the position of interim CFO be a contract position paid by the library extra help budget, and that the salary savings from the vacant administrative services manager position be transferred to that line to cover the expense. I also suggest that the salary schedule for regular employees does not include any kind of interim position. And I suggest that any kind of change and updates to the regular employee salary schedule be run by to the Board of Supervisors as per Article 8 of the JPA. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. Additional comments regarding this item? Okay. All right, we probably need to make sure that we have the position slotted in the right line in the budget.
Can I ask for clarification? Yes. Are we hiring as extra help? I mean, is this a contract position that we're putting together? That's the assumption I was making. Is this a permanent, not permanent, obviously, interim, but is this considered an employee or a contract position?
I don't think we were envisioning it as a contract position.
I know the previous interim was a contract position, and is there a reason we would not want to do that again?
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I think we all assume that this is a short-term, certain number of months position, certainly.
It has to be, right.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's what we're all believing, and so,
There's a young man who would like to,
yeah.
might help us clarify.
Hi, I'm Bruce McConnell. One of the, I think, technical things that you run into when you're hiring a contract person versus an employee is if you're going to hire someone and you're going to provide an office and they're going to come to work at 8 and they're going to go home at 5 and they're going to function alongside of other permanent employees, you're obliged to hire them as an employee. If you have a contract, it's more like a consultant. Maybe like your accountants that come in for a period of time, they do their audit, they bring their own equipment, they, find a desk somewhere, they gather the information, they go away. They do a report from their home office or something of that nature. That's more of a contract person. And that's where you get into this little discussion between, well, why don't you just make a contract person out of them and be done with it? I think technically you're obliged to hire, and it's not just me, anybody you want to bring in an office environment is going to be an employee. Unless it's a very short period of time and for a very specific type job. We want somebody to check our accounts payable records and see if we've been paying somebody too much money or something. You could probably justify a contract. But somebody's going to come in and work as a full-time person, you would be obliged to hire them as an employee.
And isn't it true that someone who is an employee, you would have supervisory responsibility, whereas a contract person would never have any supervisory responsibility over anyone?
Yeah, and that's just another item on the list. When you go through a checklist, it says, is this person an employee or is this person qualify as a contract person? Supervisory responsibilities, working, expected to come in at a specific time in the day and work for a set number of hours that coincide with the normal business day. You're providing an office, you're providing the equipment, you're providing the computer, those kinds of things. It's the old thing, if it looks like a fish and smells like a fish, it probably is. And that's what happens when you start trying to get between contract person and an employee.
Okay. So based on that, and the fact that this is a different job than a CFO position, it's been changed, then we should probably check with county council to see if we have to get approval by the Board of Supervisors, since that is what the JPA says, I would think.
It says that now, yeah. That has been changed in the proposed draft, but at this point.
Yes, so at this point,
The old
it still exists.
It's still in place. So
Yeah.
I think we do need to check
Yeah.
with county council to see if this is something that needs approval. I agree.
Okay.
Does that hold up your opportunity to come in and help us out? That's the last thing I want to see happen.
Right, exactly.
I'm not quite sure, how long you're talking about taking to check with county council. If it requires the supervisor's approval, board of supervisors, then you have an agenda issue and getting on and getting that approved and then coming back to you folks. I think you could make a good argument that during that period of time, you could hire me on as a contract employee. It would be limited to, for a very short period of time, pending the outcome of your inquiry to the county council.
Yeah.
So maybe what we can do is give direction to our
Code directors.
management to contact county council and find out if we do need to. If we do need to, the fellow who can get us on is, Don Schwartz is our liaison. So, call him and see if we can get on as soon as possible and go forward in that manner. Can we?
I'd like to have us pass something this evening, though, if we can, that authorizes us to hire you as a consultant in the interim before we can actually bring you on as the interim CFO, and make sure that we follow the correct procedure and go through all the proper steps to be able to do that. Thank you.
Just one more thing. First of all, nothing against Mr. McConnell. I'm hoping that he's going to start, like, tomorrow will be good. Second of all, I completely understand the difference between a contract and a contractor and an employee. My suggestion is that you use the extra help budget, being that this is an interim position. My main concern is that the salary schedule for permanent employees has been changed to add a new position of interim, which frankly, it's a prospect that I find quite terrifying because now it's a permanent position, interim CFO. How many are you going to hire? I want to put in my notice if that's the case. I mean, seriously, it's quite a little, it's concerning. I think that I don't see why the extra help budget cannot be used instead of the permanent employee budget. We have employees that are employees of the library that are extra help.
So do we need to check with county council if it's extra help? Do we still have
Well,
to
I think if we are.
get supervisor approval?
I don't know the answer. I think we need to check with county council that if we are creating a new position, because we're redefining what the
Role
interim
is.
does is different. I mean, this is different than what Alyssa used, her description was. So
Right.
we've changed a classification description. I don't know if that needs to go by the county. It might. I don't think anyone has a desire to have a permanent interim position. That's not the goal
And
here.
we've had an interim CFO.
Well, he was a
before.
contract position, and I think the thing with Mark was that he wasn't here full-time, and
Right.
he had other places
Right.
that he was consulting with at the same time. We were not his
Right.
sole focus.
Yeah, he wasn't here 8 to 5 in the normal course of business.
So I think he fell more into the classification as
Okay.
has been described of contract.
Well, my
Okay.
question is, can I just ask a question to clarify? So you mentioned what the Article 8 says, and that has to do with adding a job description? Okay. Not with adding a salary schedule line? Okay. So if we kept the job description,
The two are not mutually
They're-
exclusive.
right. So if we,
You're not taking out a position, you're adding a position and a new salary into the permanent employee
Okay.
schedule. Mark Walsh was an employee of the library, paid by the extra help budget.
right. So is there a way we could amend all of this tonight to make it be in the extra help budget under the old job description with, we will assign the duties as appropriate during this time and change the salary range for that? Is that possible to do all of those things here tonight? Powell is nodding, so.
Well, I don't know if we change the salary range for classification, if that needs the approval of, even on an extra help payment, if that needs the approval, because they approve general classification and salary ranges.
Well, but this wouldn't exceed the budget. They have budgetary oversight, so I'm thinking that,
They have classification oversight too in the current JPA. I don't have it in front of me with the exact wording.
So I guess the question is, in the extra help jobs, I assume that there's not an existing compensation schedule that would match this, and so that would be a change.
We don't have a separate salary schedule for extra help.
Okay.
we pay them according to the range of classification they're extra helping in.
Okay.
Do you want me to just read Article 8? of
Oh,
the
please,
JPA?
thank you, Rebecca.
It's regarding employees. It says the commission shall adopt policies, rules, and regulations for personnel relations, employment, and administration, except that the number of employees, classification, and compensation, and in parentheses, wages, hours, and conditions of employment shall be subject to approval by the Board of Supervisors.
That's pretty clear, okay.
So,
We have to consult with council, so if we can get something, at least to let Bruce start as a contract employee tomorrow morning, that would be wonderful, because we really do need his help.
Right.
Last week, or the week before would have been good, actually.
Okay, so we want to move that the commission approve, it's kind of a 1, 2, 3. We want to consult with county council. We want to
So we could move to approve this specification and salary schedule pending approval by, or consulting with county council. And then there could be a second part of it that says, you know, in the interim, for want of a better word.
Well, do we have a time frame? Can we just approve Mr. McConnell as a consultant, for want of a better word, for, 3 weeks in hopes that this will be all done, or for 4 weeks in hopes that we can get this through and then get county council, Board of Soups to give us
Do
a green
something
light.
fast?
Do something fast.
So then another question is, and I'm hoping the answer is no, but is there a Brown Act problem? Since that wasn't part of this, or because it was on the agenda to hire him at all, does it matter in what form we proceed to do that?
I'm going to go with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think because it's on the agenda to hire him as a permanent interim
As
position,
an interim.
that if we are going to then approve as a consultant, it's like, to me, that's like a lesser
Okay, I just had to throw it out there so
Yeah.
it wouldn't,
I think it's a lesser commitment of the intent.
right.
Well, it's an amendment of the motion that was brought before you, is how I would see it. I mean, if that's not what you do in a Brown Act meeting, then what is? You talk about
Yeah.
the thing that's before you, you decide if it's reasonable,
Yeah.
and then you might change your mind.
Okay. So we need to, pending consulting with county council and potentially approval by board of supervisors. Okay?
So here would be,
So we need a new motion.
right, well, no, I think we can certainly adopt the class specification and revised salary schedule pending county council, input from county council, and if needed, approval by the Board of Supervisors. We have a second action item to actually hire Mr. McConnell that can be modified to be a short-term consultant until the other position gets sorted out. And so we can go forward in that manner? Would that make sense and be within keeping of the Brown
Yeah,
Act?
It becomes a single action, pending these other approvals.
Well, there's two different motions at this point, so
Right,
I
but
would,
we can make them a single motion, can we not?
no, I would keep them separate. I would say we approve the classification pending input from county council and, if needed, approval of the Board of Supervisors, and then separately, we amend the authorization to hire Mr. McConnell to be a authorization to hire him as a consultant for 4 weeks so that he can show up tomorrow morning and help.
Okay, do we want to delineate 4 weeks?
I'm just threw that number out because we meet again in
How
next
about
month.
until November 6th?
Which is our
your
next meeting. Yeah, okay, until November 6th, then I think that would probably go forward
Okay.
in that way.
Okay, so we're going to have a new motion. So we're going to do it in 2 steps. So the first one is there a motion to approve the interim CFO class specification and revised salary schedule pending consultation with county council and, if needed, approval by the Board of Supervisors?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
Aye.
All right, any further discussion? Any further commentary? Can we have a vote on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Great, that one's approved. Okay, second resolution, can we have a motion that we will hire Mr. McConnell on a short-term basis until November 6th pending approval by the Board of Supervisors, if needed, to hire him on an interim basis.
Can I
Amend.
amend the motion? I authorize to hire Bruce McConnell, CalPERS retiree, as a consultant until November 6th. And at that point, we would ask that this resolution that hires him pursuant to the one we're going to talk to county council about be put back on the agenda.
Okay,
So does that work?
that works.
Okay. So I move that authorize the library to hire Mr. McConnell as a consultant and until November 6th of this year. Oh, as interim CFO.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Great. Let's take a
Comment.
vote. All in favor?
Public comment.
Public comment? Okay, let's take a vote. Approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, okay,
Let's hope this is right.
thank you. All right, we are now on, okay, so that was 10.1. We have 11.1, which I guess we have to do that separately, okay? So this is a motion to hire Bruce McConnell, whom we just discussed, as interim CFO within 180 days of his retirement from a CalPERS agency, and we need to fill a crucially needed position. I think we have discussed somewhat extensively what our intent is in terms of having him as truly an interim position and how we will structure that. So I don't know that we need to further discuss it.
I had a question about the CalPERS issue,
Okay.
if that's all right. So just because I want to make sure that we're not going to accidentally do it wrong and end up with a fine or something from CalPERS yelling at us. When I read it, it looks like if somebody retires from CalPERS, they have to wait 180 days before hiring on to any agency that is a CalPERS agency. And this resolution that we need somebody, it comes under the exceptions of waiting 180 days. I know in the background we were given that Mr. McConnell actually retired quite some time ago. He's just been hiring out to other agencies, and I don't know if that means, does that put a stop on the 180 days ticking when you hire out to another agency, or?
Started over, yeah, I believe, from the
Each-
date on which you retired from that CalPERS agency.
So each individual posting
Right.
starts the 180 days over again, is that correct?
Yes. I think probably the answer to your question is better to be safe than sorry. And so they do have this requirement that, and every other CalPERS agency that I've been hired by, is they have to get up in a public meeting and say they're hiring a CalPERS retiree. That's one of the requirements CalPERS has. And not doing it becomes very punitive on both sides of the table. So that's the primary thing you're doing here, is you're standing up in front of people saying, Bruce retired from CalPERS. He's been working with CalPERS people, CalPERS agencies, and we intend to hire him. And you
Okay.
send it off to CalPERS.
Madam Chair, can I just further explain? The 180-day rule came out of the pension reform. It's the initial retirement that you have to wait that period. And that's what that was about. So it doesn't matter. So just if he had retired, 60 days ago would be an issue. But
Yes, we're doing it in excess of caution then.
Okay. All right, given that background, do I hear a motion from the commission to authorize the library interim co-directors to hire Bruce McConnell as our interim CFO within 180 days of his retirement from a CalPERS agency, and we all know it's a very important position we need filled. Hear a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
And this is just hiring him back as a consultant for till
think-
November 6th? I'm confused at what we're doing.
I think we should do this, well, I don't know the rules about it. He's a consultant.
This would last beyond that. If we
Right.
authorize,
We do it.
we're complying with a
CalPERS.
CalPERS regulation here more than anything.
Yeah, they don't
Right.
care about the time.
It doesn't really, it's within 180
Yeah.
days. I think
Okay.
it'll still be within 180 days on November 6th, so this would keep going.
Okay, okay. Did we get a second? Okay. Is there discussion? Is it public comment?
Does our HR person have anything to say?
It is a CalPERS regulation, and we're erring on the side of caution here. I have spoken with CalPERS, and as I understand what Irene said about, the time of retirement, we are erring on the side of caution, just to make sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment? It's time? Anyone? Okay, can we vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great, thank you. Thanks, everyone, thank you for your patience. Okay, we're now at 11.2, and I commented, I'm not sure if everyone in the room was in the room at the time. I had made some initial remarks regarding this item, which is a resolution to authorize the library to hire Sandy Cooper, a CalPERS retiree, as an extra help employee. And I will just briefly reiterate what I said previously, because not everyone was here, which is this is not, our intention is not to hire Ms. Cooper back as a general help in any sense, but for a very specific and limited purpose, which is if we need her for fact-finding, if her knowledge of certain incidents and background is necessary, then as she is retired, we need to pay her for her time. And the estimate is 20 to 40 hours at most. I know that a lot of people were concerned over the idea that it would be significantly higher than that. That is not the case. And we are hopeful that we will come to a happy resolution with the union and not even have to go through fact-finding, in which case, of course, we would not engage Ms. Cooper. So I just wanted to clarify that, because it's easy to understand how people got concerned, thinking it was much broader than that. So let us kind of start with comments from the commission.
I have a question more than a comment. So in the document attached to the previous resolutions that gives the general rules for employment of a retiree, on the last page there is, for CalPERS, excuse me, hiring back a CalPERS retiree, there is a specific provision for former employees to be hired back for litigation purposes, service for litigation. And rather than a general, it's a position we need filled and can't be filled by any other way resolution as we did with Mr. McConnell, I'm wondering if the service for litigation wouldn't be a more specific and appropriate.
Is fact-finding litigation? I'm ignorant.
I believe it would be considered a proceeding that could fall under, it says retired former employee may be employed to prepare for potential or actual litigation or to testify in trial proceedings or at a hearing. And I think it would be considered certainly administrative hearing.
That's what it is. Yeah. Well, that makes good sense.
I'm not sure how that changes the resolution that we.
Well, it takes it out of the category of being brought on as extra hire and puts it in the category of simply being engaged as a witness at a hearing or to prepare for that hearing, which is really what we need her for.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Patrick,
I did talk with CalPERS about that particular part in the regulations about litigation. The 180-day rule still applies, so we still require a resolution from this commission.
okay.
Okay.
The 180-day rule does not apply if it's a state agency, but if it's a otherwise public agency, the 180-day rule does apply. That's the purpose of this resolution.
Okay.
Okay.
So they exempt themselves. I mean, the state, they don't have to do this, but everybody else in the world does.
But maybe the verbiage changes from extra help employee to this other category,
Sure.
which is at least a little more accurate in terms of our intention.
It's the whole point, right? I
Right.
mean, if there's a way to make the language jive with reality, that's a good thing. I mean,
Right.
absolutely, always.
So instead of as an extra help employee, what would we would call that under the description there? I mean, is there,
Well, maybe we can just.
As a per diem employee, I believe, it looks like maybe
Yes.
paid per diem.
okay,
Patrick?
My only concern about that is CalPERS ultimately has to make a decision whether this is an independent contractor or not. And that's a process that can take 30 to 60 days. If she is brought back as an extra help employee, and we clearly state, which we do, that it's needed to prepare for and participate in fact-finding, I think there's just less chance of something going wrong in the process.
okay. Okay, additional comments?
With the other hiring that we agreed to, there was set forth a range of salary possibilities. There is no salary put forth in this, so I don't think we have sufficient information in that area to agree to it. And that should be a public fact as to how much Ms. Cooper would be paid for this. I also have other concerns about her returning in this capacity. I'm not sure I agree that she's the only person who can help with the fact-finding in this matter. I'm not sure that she was always able to answer the commission's questions, or I recall a meeting of the Board of Supervisors when there were questions regarding the budget that she was unable to answer. So I am not sure that she is the best suited person for this. And truly, I think that it would be a mistake for the library to bring her back. I understand that there is some feeling that she will be a lifesaver in this situation. But I find that difficult to believe. I think our staff is hugely competent and quite able to handle this. And it might be a little bit harder, but the balance between Sandy coming back to do this activity for the library and there being a little bit harder work, which might help better understand the budget too. I don't think there's an equal balance there. My other concern is that she had 2 months to work on this before she retired. So I have a problem that wasn't completed. 2 months seems like a sufficient amount of time. That said, I'm not exactly sure what's involved in this, what her role will be, what she will be doing. So if that could be clarified too, the salary, the possible salary, exactly what her role is going to be, I think needs to be discussed.
Okay, other comments from commissioners?
I would like to respond to that. I mean, I think part of the concern is that she'll need to testify, and that obviously cannot have been done 2 months ago. But, and let me just finish, I view this as, I too have a great deal of faith in our staff and in our current interim directors, and they have requested the option of being able to utilize some of her time. To me, we are authorizing this to allow them to have all of the tools in the toolbox. If they don't need her, they won't use her. And I trust their judgment on this. So I feel like, you know, it's a very specific and targeted thing. It's for a very specific purpose, and I don't think it would have been requested if it wasn't felt that it might be necessary. And I'm willing to say yes, okay, if you need her, use her, and if you don't, don't. And I will leave it at that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, you know, we all have some concern about, you know, Sandy's involvement over time. But I do think we have to leave it up to the two people who are on the firing line, sitting right next to you. They are the two people who are going to be, you conduct, who are going to be responsible principally for this fact-finding operation. And I think we can't give them that responsibility without giving them all the tools available, which, as Julia said, they can either use or not use, but they have to have it there for them if you do need it.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comment?
I believe I agree on the side of the
Okay.
table.
All right.
Is that why you're all sitting over there?
Wait, one of us go over there.
But I do have a question, and maybe Patrick can answer it. What is the hourly rate that she would then, is it the hourly rate that she retired at, or how does that work?
I can answer.
Oh, okay.
We have a verbal and tentative agreement with Sandy that she would return at a rate of $145 per hour. That's approximately twice her rate when she left. And the reason for that rate is because she would be returning in a consultant capacity on a limited basis with no benefits. And it's my understanding that in situations like this, it's fairly standard to essentially double the rate.
Okay. And thank you. So, Patrick, yes?
Just to add some additional information to that, assuming we pursue this under that litigation rule, there is a stipulation that rate would have to be reduced by her daily retirement benefit.
So she wouldn't double dip? Well, that actually makes sense to me, because if we are paying her and not providing benefits, but paying her in lieu of benefits, then that shouldn't, reducing her retirement, reducing that by her retirement makes sense to me.
Is that a number we can arrive at fairly easily?
Yeah,
Okay.
CalPERS will provide us with that.
Okay, great.
Does it matter if she is being brought back under the more general extra help category or under this preparation for trial? Does that have any bearing on what you just said?
It's been difficult to get a specific answer from CalPERS. Under the extra help, or the more general rule, you're only supposed to be bringing somebody back in at the established rate for that position. There is, in this instance, no established rate for an extra help employee. For someone coming back to aid in litigation, it's whatever the prevailing rate is, less whatever their daily retirement benefit would be.
Okay. So is it fair to say then that the rate that would be agreed upon would then be reduced by her daily retirement payout or benefit? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying most likely that would be the case, yes.
We need to know before we agree on that.
Okay. So just to, you know, I think my view is in line with what a number of the other commissioners have said, which is I really trust both of your judgment, and we so much appreciate the job you're doing and stepping up into this role for this interim period. I feel it's our obligation as a commission to back you up in any way we can and give you as much as reasonably possible what you feel you need to do the best job you can for the library. If you feel you need the authority to bring Sandy back for a focused activity for a limited, situation, and if you end up feeling like, well, no, we actually don't need to use her, great, but we will have authorized it, and it's, it's there if you feel you need that. I mean, that's kind of how I'm thinking of it, is as much to support the two of you in continuing to do the great job you're doing for us. Okay, I think at this point, unless commissioners have any other comment, we'll take public comment. Yep.
I just have one other
Yes.
comment, and that is that even if Ms. Cooper were to offer to do this out of the goodness of her heart for no remuneration, I would object to her coming back, except to testify as needed, which can be done through a witness, subpoena and witness fee situation. So that's my last word on it. Thank you. As far as I know, unless the public says something that prompts more comment.
Do we subpoena people who are testifying on behalf of the library? Yeah.
There are things called administrative subpoenas. I'm not sure
Yeah,
how
I
we
don't know
issue
what
those.
the legal
Yeah.
situation is here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion? Oh,
We have
Patrick.
more comment, yeah.
I was just going to mention that other individuals that the library has employed as consultants in the past, their hourly rates have ranged from 125 to 150 and more. So in terms, turning back to Jamie's comment earlier, it's not an unheard of rate. So.
Okay. So I think we need to first have a motion and then take public comment, just procedurally here.
I would move that we authorize the library to hire Sandra Cooper, CalPERS retiree, as an extra help employee for the specific purpose of service of litigation in the fact-finding hearing scheduled for November 13th, 14th, and 15th of this year,
Okay.
if they need her.
Could I just add to the end of that, if they feel it is necessary?
If our co-directors feel it's necessary, yes. Okay, is there a second?
Did you get all that, Rebecca?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, and now at this point, we will take public comment. So please step up to the microphone if you'd like to comment.
My name is Dina Bliss, and I'm very grateful to both of you for stepping up. I'm very happy that you are the interim directors, and so it is with all due respect that I want to say that you have an obligation to restore public confidence as well as to support these two wonderful interim directors. And I believe that Helena Whistler has spoken rather eloquently to the issues with regard to public confidence. I have been at meetings for the last 3 years at which Sandy Cooper has offered budgetary information that has been completely unsubstantiated. Made up figures she couldn't recall or make available the following month. This is the person you want to pay $145 an hour to testify on the library's behalf. I just personally find that unbelievable and appalling. And as a member of the public and a taxpayer, I can't believe that that's the person you would call back to speak on behalf of the library and spend our money on. So I'm imploring you not to do this, because you do have an obligation to restore public confidence in you and in the public library system. Thank you.
looks to you as the Library Commission to make informed, intelligent, and inclusive decisions. We also expect that you will listen to us, that you will take us seriously. We further expect that you listen to some of the voices of authority in this community. How about the grand jury? How about the Board of Supervisors? How about the LABs? How about citizens from every single jurisdiction in this county who have spoken out how they feel about former library management? I'm just going to conclude with one more thought, and I ask you to listen to it very carefully. The classic definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Thank you.
Hi, Irene Rosario, SEIU representative. I want to echo what was said earlier about the two new co-directors and commend you for making that happen. I want to talk about Sandy's hiring. Fact-finding is about facts, and all the facts should already be there. You have to prove that you have an inability to either give what the union's asking for. Either way, either you have it or you don't have it. That's the facts that you have to prove. Sandy was never at the negotiating table. Not once did she come to the negotiating table in the last 3 years that I recall. So I don't know what facts that she will bring. The people that were at the table were Patrick, Jamie, Kathy DeWeese, Kelly Tufo, and that's it. So I really don't understand what facts Sandy's going to bring to fact-finding.
Maybe I don't understand properly what fact-finding is, but my understanding is we're going to be discussing more than just what was said at the negotiating table, but there will actually be a fact-finding process by which the budget is looked at and where
Yes.
the money went, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay.
And I want to echo what someone said previously also. I also attended many meetings that Sandy gave a presentation about the budget. Again, she could not prove or back up her facts that she presented, or they were moving targets. And it was, nobody understood what was going on except for Sandy. So you bring that to fact-finding, it won't be clear facts on your part. So I would also, I want Jamie and Dave to have whatever they need, but Sandy's not a good call. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Guma, retired librarian. You have a chance to make a fresh start here. Sandy never had anything but contempt for her staff and for the public. And I kept thinking that you would notice that she always blamed her staff for whatever was not getting done, but you never seemed to notice it. You had her paint you into a corner when it comes to relations with the union. You paid more and more money for a law firm, an anti-union law firm, that got you less and less, that ended up in an impasse, that you didn't get a contract, and you ended up with a legacy of bitterness in the library. You have a chance to do things over, but not if you hire back Sandy Cooper. If you hire back Sandy Cooper, the perception will be that you're still looking for another Sandy Cooper, and that we're going to have to go through this whole song and dance again.
Hi, I'm Neil Herring of the Sebastopol LAB. So, of course, I'm backing up Helena as our commissioner. And I find it kind of puzzling that she specifically asked for the motion to include what the rate of compensation would be for this expert witness, and it didn't become part of the motion. How come?
Hello, I'm Dale Miller, and I have been to many, many meetings and where Sandy Cooper was speaking, And every meeting where she was specifically asked, what does it cost to open the library on Monday? I can recall 4 different numbers, and none of them could ever be substantiated. So the big issue with the public never could have an answer to. So I'm really in doubt as to how this person could be an expert witness. And she definitely had an anti-union bias in the people that she hired. And as just a person who uses the library and loves it, I would really wish to see the librarians, this whole contract negotiation resolved, because spending the money on the attorneys and not putting it in the library staff's pocket is just so fundamentally wrong. And, I totally back up the new interim people, but also Helena is our representative, and she had something very important to say about this issue, and I hope that you wouldn't just go along and do the same old rubber stamp that the commission has done for so long. So thank you.
Kathy Nixon, member of the negotiating team and also a library employee. I wanted to express some concerns, echoing a lot of what has already been said. Thank you, Helena, for your comments. I think they are exactly right on. I haven't heard too much spoken from the active employees, but when it became apparent, there was let me back up just a wee bit. There's been such a breath of fresh air with the new hires of the interim directors. And then when word was out that the commission chose to hire the director who has created so many problems, or who has blocked you into so many corners, the morale for staff, it was just like throwing kerosene. It's just, no matter, and I really, my right brain understands your perspective. She's gotten you into this mess, and she has the facts and the information to perhaps justify fact-finding and maybe make the arguments that will carry the day for the commission, for the library. But there are costs involved with this, and it's not simply what will she bring to the table. And I'm not very organized in my thoughts, but just the issues of staff's concern and the lack of faith that this person is going to be worth the money that you are going to spend for her expertise it pulls into question perhaps whether we're really on a new path. But
hello, my name is Ron Cecina. I'm a Sonoma County Library driver, which I have a lot of contact with employees during the day. I can remember when the email was, read the email and went around to the branches, the basic comment was, oh my God, what are they thinking of? And what was said before as far as just the employee morale that basically hit bottom on hearing that email. I think everyone was wondering if you didn't hear on that Friday afternoon, the big sigh of relief that, I think a lot of people had. And to have that, basically being basically shoved back to them I felt it was just totally, the timing was so far off. And I think it was just a big disconnect of how you feel, what you were thinking, and how the employees were thinking through this whole period of time over the past few years. I see the disconnect, and somehow I hate to say it because I respect all of you, but I'm kind of glad this JPA is coming about to bring a little bit of change. And I think the employees feel that same way. If this is the way everybody this continual thought process is continuing this way. I have to welcome that new GPA and see if there's going to be a change, because I don't see it happening here.
Ed Schoon from Guerneville. There have been some very thoughtful remarks given to you folks this evening, and I don't see them making any connection, and that's really troublesome. One basic question I still haven't gotten an answer to is what would happen if you didn't hire her back and you just let it go and we dealt with this in a proper new way and just let it go. Table this damn motion. Thank you.
Are there any additional comments?
Just from me.
Okay.
I would like to know if there's a time limit. I mean, I hear, all right, so it's as she's needed, but are we gonna have like a set number of hours saying it cannot go past this? So that's something that, you know, listening to all this and looking at the documentation, there's no set time limit, and I would like to see something like that.
Okay, thank you. Additional comments?
Can you give me an answer to what would happen if you didn't do this? Do you know over here what would happen if you didn't do it?
That would be, I understand your question, sir, and if you wait for the process to play out, you may get an answer.
Okay, so first, do we have any additional comments from folks who are here? I'd like to make sure everyone has a chance to speak. Who would like to speak?
I'm delegating to a retiree, and I have to say is that I agree a lot with what Helena had said. I feel that Sandy hasn't represented us well. I think that she was uninformed in most cases. If anybody's an expert, Elise Alfano was the person that knew more about the budget, and yet I felt like she was walked over, ignored in most cases. I don't know exactly what Jamie and David here are looking for in terms of expert critical need that's going to be found. She had time to put this down in paper. If there was something specific, I don't know. All I'm saying is I really do feel that she hasn't done her job in the past, and I cannot believe that she's going to do anything now, and I just wish you'd table the matter. Thank you.
Other comments? Other comments from anyone else who is here that wants to speak on this item? Everybody? Okay. Additional comments from the commission?
I would like to know what you hope to get from Sandy, and if she were not available to you, how that would that have a negative effect on your ability to do what you need to with fact-finding?
I think I can speak to that. I have been part of the negotiating team for library management for the past couple years. So I've been at the table, and one of the remarks I've heard is that there has been no staff person representing management in the fact-finding preparations to date and the hearings that are planned, and that's not true. I'm going to also be a witness at fact-finding, and I do feel that if we go forward with fact-finding without the former director, that we will be at a disadvantage. Just because during the past year, we have not had a CFO consistently. We've either had no one in that position, or we've had an interim CFO in that position. And short of bringing Elisa back, I don't think we have anyone else on staff who has the detailed understanding of the library's budget, other than the former director. So yes, we could go forward without her. I think our case would be weakened, and I feel like I can't go into more specific details than that with many bargaining unit members here, just because it involves the library's strategy at
Right.
fact-finding.
But your assessment is that the library could be negatively affected by not having Sandy's time as an option.
Yes, I feel like questions could be asked that if we did not have her there, there would be either nobody else present who could answer them thoroughly, fully, who had the direct contact with people at the county in regard to our budget, our revenue, our RDA funds, our expenditures, our capital projects, and so on for the last year. I think she has the answers to all of those questions. And yes, others of us have bits and pieces of it, but we don't have the full, I think, depth that she has.
Thank you.
Other comments?
My understanding, if it's correct, is that the fact-finding situation is an adversarial situation. Is that not correct? So there are, like, cross-examinations going back and forth?
Yes, that's my
Okay,
understanding.
so if as some feel, Sandy's performance is so completely inadequate that the opposition will certainly be able to attack it. If, on the other hand, it's really quite good, then this works to our advantage. And it is our responsibility, if I'm not mistaken, to present the best foot forward on behalf of the library. And what I'm hearing is that without Sandy present, our best foot is not forward.
I would agree with that.
I would like to express just a slightly different point of view, and I keep hearing people refer to the library and the library's advantage or disadvantage. And one thing that always has disturbed me since I've been here is a sense of adversarial relations between library management, library union. I see us all as the library, and my whole goal in stepping forward into this position was really to attempt to clear some of that adversarial air. And really that is my long-term goal, and I really think it can be done. We are one library. I mean, we're not capitalists here, you know, in management trying to extract surplus value from the workers. That just doesn't happen in the public sector. So with that in mind, I would really like to put aside just linguistically this notion of saying the library would be at a disadvantage, because the library hopefully will come out in the best regardless of how this plays out. If the facts stand in favor of the union's point of view, great. You know, if the facts stand in favor of library management's previous point of view, great. The facts, as someone said earlier, are the facts, and they should speak for themselves. My goal in having Sandy available to us is to be able to get at what her perspective on those facts was. I don't know how anyone's brain works, and I want access to that intelligence. I can make a choice at that point whether or not to discard that intelligence or to keep it. But I want access to it. It would be like deleting all the files on someone's computer just because you disagreed with the way they did things. We're not doing that. We're keeping those files. We want access to those files. I want access to the brain of Ms. Sandy Cooper. And so, that said, I hope people could see that it's reasonable to ask for that, despite any feelings anyone may have on the matter, just in the interest of promoting the library as a unified public service institution that can do its job most effectively. That's it.
Thank you. And I'm going to reiterate my view that I, within what's reasonable, really want to provide the two of you with the opportunity to have the resource available that you think you need to, you know, to not only address this challenge, but, you know, all the challenges that you've so willingly stepped up and have before you. And if you decide, no, we actually don't need her time, or, you know, we only need 3 hours of her time, or whatever, that's your call. But I personally feel like it is, you've asked, I want to be able to provide you with that. So, other comments?
There was a question about the length of time. Is fact-finding, if we go forward, is there a date set?
Yes.
So that would be the length of time that we would ask for Sandy's services?
Well, it's a 3-day hearing at this point. We don't know exactly how many hours each of those days will go. And we believe that there could be 5 to 8 additional hours needed for the former director to prepare for the hearing.
For us to be there with her as she prepares. This is part of getting that necessary access, I think.
So, and the dates are November 13th, 14th, and 15th.
In your opinion, is there room to renegotiate the hourly rate?
Sounds like there has to be with the BRRS regulations. I mean,
Do you mean in addition to that?
I mean, are you set at 145? Is there some reason that we can't do something less? And does this come out of the extra help budget?
But isn't it 145 reduced by half of her? So that will not be a cost to the library, my understanding. Is that correct, Patrick?
it'll be a cost to the library. It would just be reduced by the amount of her daily
Retirement.
or hourly calculation of her
Yeah,
retirement.
so it will not be $140 per hour.
Do we know what the cost
We don't know
to
We
the
don't.
library
precise
will be?
amount.
CalPERS has to give us that figure.
Okay. Something less than, for the most part, then? Okay.
I just have a concern, if this is fact-finding, then Sandy's opinion on what she was thinking about at the time of the budget question is, at the time the question is directed toward, doesn't seem essential. If we're looking at facts, it's not really what her state of mind was at the time. It has to be the facts of the budget. So do you have more information about exactly what's involved? Because now I'm confused.
And I can understand the difficulty of answering this question when this is an adversarial process, as much as we would like it not to be. And the library management has an interest in not necessarily putting on the public record all of the strategies and.
But isn't there like a set way that a fact-finding
Well, the procedure, what is the
hearing is
procedure for
done?
that?
And what, is,
What is the fact-finding procedure? Do you know
I
this?
may be able to help.
Okay.
Fact-finding is kind of a misnomer. I think what it is what's sometimes called interest arbitration, where if parties to a collective bargaining agreement, one of them says there's an impasse, that means they can't reach an agreement. They submit it to a neutral, a third-party arbitrator, whatever the issues are that are at impasse. So that third party usually has the authority to say, okay, this is the agreement you're going to live with based on the budgetary or other facts that are presented to him or her. So it's called fact-finding, but I believe that it's actually a binding arbitration process.
I think you're wrong there. I don't believe it is an arbitration process, but my understanding is it is not binding on either party.
Irene, can you help us out here?
Okay, so I'm going to kind of put it in layman's.
Thank you.
So the bottom line is we are at an impasse. We believe that you have the ability to pay what we're asking. You say that you don't have the ability. Fact-finding is you bring all of your evidence or reasoning or budget information saying why you cannot afford what we're asking for. We in turn do the same, saying this is how much money you have, this is the way you're spending it, and you can't afford to do it. That's basically what fact-finding is. We're trying to prove who, if you have an ability to pay or not, is number one. Does it harm the public? Is one of the other factors. So do you have an ability to pay what we're asking? Does it harm the public? What we're asking, does it harm the public, basically? And then it is not binding. It is a recommendation that the chair of the fact-finding, which is the appointed facilitator, state person, And then there's two members from, one from the library and then one from the union, and they're called the panel. So the evidence is presented to the panel, they review the evidence, and then the fact finder makes a recommendation.
Thank you.
A quick question, Irene, before you go. So is it looking at the present budget, a snapshot of today's budget, or are you going back in time to look at the budget?
Well, I don't want to disclose our strategy either, but whatever we need to do to prove our case is what evidence we would bring forward.
Right.
Same thing for you, so it could or could not.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very, very helpful. Thank you. Okay, I think at this point, we've had a lot of good discussion, and I really appreciate the comments by our members of the public who've taken their time to come and speak on this, and the dialogue we've had with the commission, and the viewpoint shared by our directors as to their perception. So I feel like we've heard a lot of very valid comments this evening, and at this point, I think we need a vote. So all those in favor of
And just to clarify, the motion was amended to specify that we would be authorizing service for litigation so that the reduction by daily retirement amounts would kick in.
Right.
And did you want to amend it to restrict the number of hours?
I think we could cap the number of hours, certainly.
What do you think the max, like 40?
You're okay with that?
Yes.
What would you guys think is reasonable?
I think 40 would give us
Okay.
all the leeway we need.
Not to exceed 40. And we understand you don't think you're going to need that much. Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to say, this is a vote to support our interim directors.
Absolutely.
They have expressed this need, and we, as the commission, well, I'll speak for myself, but as the commission wants to support you. So you've asked for this. I think that's what this vote's about.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay, and I want to say I do support the interim directors.
Of course.
Despite not voting yes for this.
Good views by all on this one. Okay, thank you. Okay, we are now on discussion item 12.1, which is the draft procedures for the director recruitment process. And the commission had previously requested draft procedures, including a budget estimate for going through a process the library would follow to recruit a permanent library director. And we have a document here, 12.1, which I believe, Patrick, are you the appropriate person, or would Patrick be the better person?
The entire management team worked on this. Patrick drafted it,
Okay.
but I'm happy to take questions and
Okay.
refer to him too.
All right. So,
Excuse me just a second, on the page 1 of 4, the major decisions, should we go through, or is that's what we'll do, go through each one of these points and make a,
That would be very helpful.
okay.
okay, and I think some of these, I assume that the proposed process is intended to address a number of these questions. Is that a correct assumption on my part? I mean, where you have kind of answered some of these questions in terms of how you've laid out this process flow here.
Yes, for instance, we are assuming we're going to use a search firm.
Right, and you're assuming that the commission chair has appointed a subcommittee, which in fact the
Yes.
commission chair has done.
Yes.
So, Patrick, do you want to walk us through this, or?
Well, I think, and this clearly in the front, some of the decisions that will have to be made in the process. What you have in front of you is strictly a recommendation.
Okay.
The commission and probably more likely the subcommittee is going to have to address some of those specifics. So in talking with some other individuals, I tried to flesh out as fully as possible the different steps that would most likely have to take place. Obviously, we go with a search firm, and there would be some modifications there. They may have some input in terms of additional steps or steps that don't have to be taken. There may be some discussions there about, is there more that we want the search firm to take on versus the commission or the subcommittee doing? But it does, I think, outline fairly clearly all the different steps that we will need to take and an approximate timeline for accomplishing that.
Okay. And I had some questions going through this in terms of the, maybe we can talk for a minute about the bundling together of the CFO search with the director search. I noticed that's kind of a question in here, right?
Yes, we thought, perhaps there may be some economy in bundling it together, that we might be able to get something of a discounted rate versus handling two separate searches. I don't know yet at this point if that would be a possibility, but...
Had we even discussed using a search term for the CFO?
No.
I don't know that we've even...
No, that's why it's a question.
Right,
Right.
okay. I just...
We just wanted to throw that out there as a possibility.
Thank you.
Because another thing is, the cost for this is based on search firm performing full service in this recruitment. In other words, handling it from start to finish, doing sourcing, just the whole shebang. For a CFO, you might recruit them just to solicit the candidates, but then you do all the rest of the work yourself. And that's significantly less expensive than, employing full service.
Okay.
Right.
I had a question. So the under search firm, on step 15, you said where you have the subcommittee, so research search firms. So it looked like as the HR manager, you would get proposals from specific search firms. I wasn't quite sure what that meant, research search firms, after we had the proposals. Is that evaluating the proposals?
Yeah, evaluating. That was a poor
Okay.
use of words there. Evaluating the search firms is what
Okay.
I meant.
Do you have firms in mind?
Right now, I have a list of possibly 5 search
Okay.
firms, but probably only 2 that would be best, just based on the feedback I've gotten from outside individuals.
And are all 5 of those firms with expertise in the library arena?
Yes, yes.
Okay. That would be important, I think. Okay. And on class specification, I'm kind of jumping around here, number 8, subcommittee with input from COF. And so COF are the folks that we've hired to do the compensation study?
Correct.
Okay. And I think, Jamie, you said they've already kind of started down the road of focusing first on the director?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
So what do you need from us?
Answers the question. Do you need?
I think at this point, the major questions would be, who's going to take on some of the major roles? In other words, to what extent will it be the full commission? To what extent will it be the subcommittee? Just to get confirmation that we do in fact want to proceed with a search firm so that we can start gathering those quotes. Whether or not we want to pursue bundling the CFO recruitment with this or not. I think most of the other questions would be questions to be determined most likely by subcommittee.
Okay. So the subcommittee, Paul, you're on it?
I'm on it.
And I'm on it, and Tim is chairing it. So you've got your subcommittee put together. Let's have a brief discussion. Are there any commissioners that feel we should not use a search firm for the position of director?
I think we approved it last time.
Okay.
I think, didn't we approve this at the last meeting?
Yeah, I know we discussed it.
We
I
discussed
don't
it.
remember
We
approval
discussed
or
it.
not,
We
but,
didn't. Okay.
yeah.
I don't have a problem with that.
No, I would like to use a search firm.
So
I
I-
think the staff is stressed enough that we don't have the expertise. Let's go to somebody who does this for a living.
In terms of bundling for a CFO, I have some questions and some timing, and it actually timing about this entire procedure that concerned me, because the current joint powers agreement and the new joint powers agreement at this point say that the director hires the CFO.
Right.
So we would be bundling to present to whoever the new director, or for you folks. Okay. Just trying to get clear who we're planning
We
to.
can't wait.
No, okay.
Yeah, and I really think a new director would be much more comfortable with coming into a place where there was a CFO in
right.
place.
And then my only other concern is the timing that we have structured here is that the final selection is going to be between February 3rd and March 7th, which means that potentially 10 to 12 new commissioners are going to show up the very first day, and you're going to say, which one of these candidates would you like? I'm just,
Although I think it's very appropriate that the new commission select who they
Right.
want. So
Yes.
I think that is completely appropriate. I think we need to think about the timing, certainly to do the legwork up front in terms of identifying the search firm, engaging the search firm, having them get their job description, getting all the details, and maybe start pulling in some candidates. But I do think it'll be important that the new commission be, engaged when we actually get to, selecting the candidates, the final pool or however, right? Because they're gonna have to live with that person, and it's only right that they, be involved enough. I mean, I don't think that they need to. I don't think we need to wait to pick a search firm for the new commission, but I do think we want the new commission to be the ones to actually pick who their new director is.
Are you going to want to put that off if the new commission is not in place as planned?
Well, I think
No.
we're assuming.
We're assuming February 1st.
Fingers crossed, that they are going to, that the cities are going to, except for Healdsburg, move forward with the new JPA, sign it.
China in the
They're going to stick to Mike McGuire's schedule and sign on the dotted line, and there'll be new folks in these chairs,
Well, see, it's really unknown. So, I mean, to me, if I were you, I would act as if you are the commission.
Absolutely. You
And
can't
You have full
wait around.
authority over this library right
Let's
now.
assume there won't be a new commission, and just go ahead.
That's what I mean by act as
well,
if.
we have to move forward, absolutely. But I
right,
think we also need to.
Can't wait.
If there is a new commission sitting in these chairs, they need to have the chance to interview
I think
that
we'll
person.
know, the joint powers agreement right now, they're doing the roadshow, which we should get very soon.
Any minute.
And there's already 2 committee meetings, JPA, what we were calling it, JRAC meetings scheduled in November for the committee to then take the feedback from all of the different boards and counties and board of supervisors and city councils and vote on what gets incorporated into the JPA and amend it further and do whatever fiddling they're going to do with it, and then optimistically take it out for actual approval to all of the cities and the county in mid-December. So we can certainly go forward, and the way this is scheduled, I think we should know by mid-December if we're actually going to have a new JPA or not, and a new commission. And if we are, we can maybe change the scheduling such that it allows the new folks more of a selection, and if we're not, we just keep charging forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think by mid-December too, we ought to have on the horizon a couple of names anyway. So it's not as if
Couple of
the
names.
the new commission would have to start all over.
No,
You know,
I
we'd
think
have
that's
some
true.
people who would pop up and say, yeah, these are a couple of good folks.
Well, I think you have to be careful with having not too much time between interviews and actual selection, because you lose candidates along the way if you can't keep them on the hook too long.
Everybody wants to come and live in Sonoma County. You know that. You don't even have to pay us.
So, am I correct in assuming that the committee, the subcommittee, is going to fine tune this and come up with like approximate dates and spell out the public participation and things like that?
Yeah, yes. I mean, clearly the subcommittee is going to need to do that, but I think it's important to get as much feedback, questions, concerns, suggestions from the broader commission at this point. You know, if someone has a strong view on a particular aspect, you know, we should hear that as sooner than later, right? And, particularly, I did want to know if there was any strong views about like the bundling of the CFO.
Well, I think we need more information about that because it's hard to believe that it would be really cheaper since they're two separate positions. They'd have to be doing the process for each of those positions. So I don't know if you get a 2-for-1, but it doesn't seem likely.
Yeah, but maybe when we get the proposals, we could have the proposal written of what if the scope of service is just to recruit, the director, and then kind of an A-B. B, and if it were to do a more limited role for the CFO, what would that cost?
Yeah, so you could do that in the proposals to the request for proposals.
Right.
The other thing I think are we doing a nationwide search for a CFO as well as the director, or what is the commission envisioning on that?
I guess you'd have to get feedback from the search firms. I mean, they may look at it and say, we can't find this person in Sonoma County or
Right.
Northern California or something. So I don't know if we can answer that right now.
I don't know what the job description was, but apparently, we did one recruitment process already, and we're not satisfied with the applications received from
Right.
just advertising locally. So I
Right.
would think we need
But
to
that's-
expand.
Yes, but nationwide, I'm not sure, but.
Yeah, you might do like a California search or
Right,
something like that.
There's no really such a thing as a local search anymore. If you post something on the internet, it's a national search. And
Well,
so
that's true.
people look for jobs all over the place. I would say that what we did last time was a national search. It just may have only attracted applicants from our area, given the moving expenses, the cost of living, all the salary considerations. But I guess I was sort of hoping for a twofer from this search firm, they're doing a brochure anyway, why not just, put in some different words on the top of the second brochure? So maybe it's unrealistic. I'm pretty naive about those things.
All right, let's get some input from, so you're going to talk to 3 or 5 search firms. Let's get some input from them, to what do they think about it?
Right, and I mean, we can certainly do, as it's been suggested, here's option A for this proposal for that, here's option A1, A2, kind of thing, see if it makes a difference.
Okay, so in terms of next steps then, do you have enough for what you need to be able to move forward in getting some search firms' proposals and to work with the subcommittee on that process?
I believe so. What I'm hearing is that, at least initially, we're going to go with the outline that we've shown here, but then as the subcommittee meets, they obviously will tweak that, finalize it, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, the subcommittee is not met. They just were formed.
Do we want public comment on this?
Are there public comment on this action, on this item, this discussion item? Anyone like to say something? Come on forward.
Ron Cecina, the Sonoma County Library. I just wondered that on the previous commission meeting, you had mentioned that you were going to kind of put a fast forward on determining the director's salary in terms of how it would match up to other comparable, directors. I mean, where are we at there? Has that been approached yet? Have you come up with any numbers? How is that going to work into your plan of how your headhunters are going to approach, this when they go out to find somebody?
So on step 8 on this is draft changes to class specifications, and that's the input with COF, and that's what we were confirming here with our directors, that the COF, which is the firm that's doing a compensation and category, we did ask them to start first with that director position.
And we haven't heard back.
But that was their directive, was get us that one first.
I guess we need to pester them.
So we don't yet have the data, but yes, Patrick.
You asked if I had everything here that I needed. I guess I was hoping a little bit this evening that maybe there might be some public comment just about how they might envision an interview panel or panels, or how they might envision getting any public comment on candidates. There's all kinds of options out there, and it's not a decision that has to be made tonight.
Right.
But it would be good to start, I think, hearing some of those thoughts and ideas.
Right. So definitely, I think we've all envisioned that the process includes external panels with members of the public and key stakeholders, and I'm sort of envisioning that that's part of what the subcommittee working with you and the other leadership team will do, is to figure out how many, who needs to, but certainly public comment if there's specific views.
Hi, Neil Herring. I just wonder why the commission seems to leap to the conclusion that you need to pay a subcontractor, I guess a search firm. If library staff were direct employees of the county, I don't think you'd be talking about a search firm. You'd be saying, oh, we've got the personnel, we've got human resources. That's what we pay people who know something about hiring to do. So it just seems to be a historical record of throwing money at outside contractors. Our staff our management isn't competent enough to conduct collective bargaining, so we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on lawyers to represent management, and our human resources isn't competent or whatever to conduct a classification and job description study, so spend some more money. And now we want to hire a director in a process that should involve not just the commission looking for candidates, but as you just pointed out, steps of contact, screening, vetting by LABs, the public, various levels of concern. So if the candidates are going to go through all that, this is the 21st century. You can find candidates just by posting the right notice. You can attract candidates. Why are we going to spend tens of thousands of dollars to find those candidates?
Thank you for your comments. Welcome, Chairman. All right, we'll continue with this item. So there's really not any further action, right? This is a discussion item. Your mic is coming? Okay. So, any commissioners, any other comments before we move on to the next item?
Well, I just want to say to Neil that the county actually does use search firms to hire high-level county administration staff, like directors of departments, and they routinely do that. They don't just rely on their human resources department. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Helena. Okay, so we are now, I believe, on to 12.2, which is the items to include in the upcoming report on the reduction in service hours. And here, the commission is to identify specific items to be included in the staff report on the library service hours scheduled for the November meeting. And I'm going to just give you my most important item, if I may, over to it, which is I would like to have a credible hard cost analysis of the cost to reopen that ties to the reported savings on the closures. I'd like to have the numbers put. Other.
Yeah, that to me is probably you should hit the bottom line. That's the most important thing.
I'm a banker. I want
What's it
bottom
gonna
line.
cost? What's it gonna cost?
So that's number 8 on this list that apparently was part of the list last year. And then we have number 4, acceptable methodology. We want your input on for estimating that cost. And one of the reasons for the multitude of previous cost estimates was an attempt on occasion to take into account the need for adequate staffing, bringing the library up. We don't feel that even open at 40 hours right now, we're adequately staffed. So does this cost estimate include or not include bringing the staffing up to adequacy prior to adding additional hours? Or does it simply mean keeping the present staffing level and adding on additional hours? What is your acceptable methodology?
Or both.
If it's both, then you're going to once again get multiple, you just asked for a credible hard cost of reopening tied to the savings from closing. So if that's the way we're doing it, that means one thing, we wind up with one number.
Everything that I've been hearing for many, many months is that the staff is really stretched very thin.
Yes.
We really don't have enough people to do adequately the things that we want to do and feel we ought to be doing. Consequently, if we're going to add more hours, I think it's very, very naive to think we can do it with the same number of people who are now overworked with the number of hours that we have.
Or even just adding the number of hours of additional bodies for the 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours additional to restore closed hours, that would still result in a staff that was stretched very thin. We have vacant positions, we have major vacant positions throughout the system that have remained vacant for a number of years. Do we restore those vacant positions to get up to a baseline before we consider restoring hours? These are some of the important questions that give rise to such a variety of estimates over the past few years in what it costs. And it seems like it should be a simple number. It really does. But it really depends on what your baseline is, what your criteria are. And if we could have some help defining those criteria, then I think we could arrive at a number.
And where would you get that help?
From you. We need the definition from the commission, unless you want, a total judgment call. I mean, we can definitely talk to staff and, get input up and down the line. I'd be very interested in hearing tonight from any staff who are here about their feelings about those two kind of approaches. I mean, it's really not a simple mathematical calculation. It has so much more involved in it. And I would really like guidance from anybody.
Well, I would think that the library would have, the staff, you, the staff, would have a better handle on what is the base minimum to do the work without completely stressing out staff. So I think we have to look to you, and in my mind, I think perhaps I, as a commissioner, would like to know what the outside number is. You know, what are we trying to strive for? We want to have library branches that operate smoothly and serve the public and have adequate staffing. So I would like to know what that number is so we can then go from that point forward to figure out the cost.
Adequately staffed additional hours. I'm laughing here. I just had my kitchen done, and the guy came in and he said, well, this is what it's going to cost you to do your kitchen. And I said, okay. Now, let's see what I don't need. But you have to start somewhere, and that's the number I would like to see. Where do you start to adequately staff the library with adding on, plus the additional hours that we're now closed?
And I guess I would like two numbers. One is, what would it take to bring us up to be adequately staffed for the current hours we're open? And then, what would it take to be adequately staffed for additional hours beyond that?
Yes, I think that's what I want also.
Is that clear? Is that helping?
I think that's already been provided.
But it doesn't seem to tie at all to what we were told we saved by closing on Monday.
That's right.
Because we don't want to return to that model.
And that may be because the view is that it didn't tie because we are not adequately staffed. So maybe that's a number I'd like to know too, frankly, is given our lack of adequate staffing, what would it cost to be open on Monday?
Understaffed.
Understaffed as we are. And just because I think the public really wants, at least an answer to that.
We think that was one of the numbers provided earlier as well.
There are a lot of numbers provided.
So, we're going to look at all the calculations that were done and the criteria that were used, and it's possible, I have to warn everybody, that we'll come back with like 3 different estimates on what it costs to reopen on Mondays.
We've already done that.
And we've done that, but,
So-
it looks like we're going to do it again.
So David, maybe it's a matter of vetting it, certifying it, and repackaging it up for consumption by all of us, the broader community.
Okay.
And just, maybe it takes all of us a little extra time to wrap our brains around, okay, this number, is where we'd like to be, the golden state, and maybe this number here is not the level of staffing we'd ideally like, but maybe we can live with it.
Okay.
Or at least it gets us partway there,
Okay.
And
It might be helpful, and I guess I would like to know, has there been a time in recent history that the library has been adequately staffed?
No.
Okay, so we don't have yeah.
What does define recent history?
21 years. Well, there you go. Okay, well, so there isn't a baseline that we can start from when you say adequately staffed.
Well, we have vacant positions. We have, one thing you can start with also that I don't think we've done up till now is looking at, if you look at under new elements to consider, we have number 7, a baseline of paid time off to which staff are entitled annually. We need to take that number into account. People have been unwilling to take their time off, which is a very terrible situation when you have people working without taking vacation, without being willing to call in sick, just because they don't want to let down their coworkers. And really, that does happen. So are we going to bring everything up to a level of reasonableness and then look at, on top of that, what would it cost?
And I have, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think some of the frustration has been, I understand, I heard frustration in your voice that these are all numbers that have, and I understand it. These are all numbers that have been provided at some point. I think the problem is that there has not been clearly defined what this number is, what this number is, what this number is. So,
If we did that,
verify the numbers we have and then tell me This number is the number of what it takes for everybody to be staffed fully and for extra hours. And this number is the number that it would take if they will all hate you, but you open on Monday anyway. And this number is the number. I mean, just so we know what we're looking at, because we do see all these numbers, and I'm not clear on which one is for what.
Okay.
And I don't know where it might be in here, but one of my pet things is we get into either or thinking. And I think that we have come to the place where it's clear that the single schedule model of people replacing illnesses throughout the system is not working. And so short of increasing hours, are there alternatives that would allow Monday hours, and so that there's less hours per day but open more days of the week? Is there, the other ideas that came up when we were in the process of doing this originally was the idea of sister libraries or brother libraries, where a library in a region is open on a Monday and the library on another open, it would be closed, and one would be closed on Tuesday and another one. So I'd like to have that looked at also, is that are there, now that we know that the single system of employment, everybody being on the same schedule, didn't have the effect that it was supposed to or could have had or wanted to have, are there alternatives so that then once we increase the staff to adequately staff the libraries, the hours we currently offer, short of expanding them, is there a better way to distribute those hours, or an alternative, or brainstorm of different ways? That's another piece I would be interested in.
Yeah, what would the increase in extra help be to stagger opening days and hours as opposed to having everybody on the same schedule? I think that's...
Well, I think...
To look at, I understand you're saying after we bring everybody up to speed, up to staffing levels, but let's just say hypothetically, being able to bring everybody up to staffing levels is way down the road. Are there extra help numbers we can look at that would allow some staggering before then that might help alleviate some of the frustration? Is that, we're asking a lot. Could you just give us all the numbers and tell us everything?
We're up to 15 different reports now. So. No, this is good because it gives a sense that there's a willingness to look at alternative schedules. These are all things we'd have to talk about with all the staff and make sure that it's an agreeable approach, But I think just an expression of a willingness to look at what would it actually cost to staff rationally is a really huge first step. And I think you really have to look at that number hard.
So some of these other elements down here will come up when you do these other reports, like if we weren't closed on Mondays, but we were, had shorter hours on other days. That would impact that 3-day weekend, right? Mm-hmm. And what is the potential alignment of the history?
Okay, I can explain this. We have a history room that's open hours that don't quite correlate with the central library, who is their natural pair for assistance and staffing and so on. So on Saturday, they're open from 11 to 6, which means that the central library is closed for 2 hours when they get out, oftentimes in the dark, at night on Saturday into that parking lot, sometimes by themselves. And it's not a great situation, and I would like to see, and I've talked with the staff about this, them closing at 4 on that day and staying open till 8 on Wednesday, just as Central does, and that way their hours would align and the staffing would work. And everyone seems agreeable to that, and everybody's saying that someone else thought it was not an agreeable solution a few years ago, so now no one seems to think it's not an agreeable solution. I'd like to just do that.
Makes sense.
If there's a reason not to, which I haven't heard.
First of all, I don't know whether it was announced, but the reason I'm late is that the city of Petaluma tonight talked about the joint powers agreement. So I apologize to not be here 2 places at one time. All right, we have some issues about the agenda that we're concerned about the time. And so we're wondering about if perhaps the implementation of the guidelines for Library Advisory Board budgets can be postponed to the November.
Public comment on the item that you just talked about?
Certainly. No, go ahead. It's public comment. Sorry, I forgot. I needed to get into gear.
I understand. That's why I thought it would be not terribly rude to interrupt.
Thank you, Dean.
Okay, so as a member of the public, it's something that I've wanted since the very first moment the closure was announced, which is the figures for what does it cost to run each branch. I think that lots of people in the public want to understand at their local level, what does it cost to run our branch? So what would it cost to open Sebastopol on Monday, or what would it cost to open Sonoma on Monday, or Healdsburg on Monday, is a different thing than what would it cost to open the entire system on Monday. We can obviously compile those numbers and get an aggregate number, but I think the individual numbers make sense, especially if we're talking about sister and brother libraries being open. And I cannot tell you how much we would like to have a picture of what would be some options other than all libraries being open the same number of hours, the same days. Thank you.
When the library hours were cut, and even before then, the circ staff is the most essential part. The part of the staff that is the most stressed when there's understaffing, the part that's the most essential for public services. All of that falls most centrally on the circ staff. I would like to see figures separated out for public service positions, as opposed to, well, when Sandy came back with, I think, a 1.9 million or something figure for what it would take to reopen on Mondays, she threw in all the 9 positions that the library administration had offered to eliminate at a previous contract negotiation because they were trying to save money on that. Most of them were not circ staff positions. And I want to see those positions, if you think that they're essential, why you think that they're essential. For instance, we used to have a head of reference and a branch manager for Central. Now, that got conflated into a single position. Now, no doubt that puts a stress on the Central reference staff, but it doesn't make a great deal of difference in terms of the public being able to access the library and the library being open on Monday. So I would like to see the figures for the circ staff and the public service staff separated from the other positions that you think are essential, and I'd like to know why those other positions are essential.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, moving along. There are some items that we are wondering about postponing. One of them is the guidelines for Library Advisory Board budgets. Can that go till November?
Are there any Library Advisory Board people here who feel like it couldn't? I mean, it's a kind of a complex logistical thing. I would like it to wait to November, if it could. But if anyone's desperate for their $500 to be made available, then we should figure out how to do that sooner.
Okay, I don't see.
Okay, no one's rising up.
Okay, the other issue is the 12.6, the transition plan to be presented after the JPA presentation. We could see that could be postponed.
Yeah.
I know that it's your thing, but we could see if that being postponed. And the other thing is, the other possibility is your intentions and aspirations, but I kind of feel like it'd be useful for us to do that tonight. Just because there are some things that you are asking of us that I think would help you get along the road faster. So if we can do that succinctly and
Can I make a suggestion that we let Don Schwartz make his presentation and go home?
Right.
before we talk
Absolutely.
about aspirations,
Oh,
that
yeah.
we could flip those two.
Yes, I agree with that entirely. I could almost give it.
The interesting part, you're not staying for it? Oh, my goodness. Are we gonna be? Nobody cares. Nobody cares about what the new
Okay,
commission.
is there a way for us to be able to see that too, although?
Before Don starts, I would just like to say that as we go through this, although our approval is not actually required for any of this, I think we're still allowed to give feedback and make suggestions, are we not?
Everybody is.
Okay, so keep that in mind when you're listening.
Yeah, it's a little bit askew, but I'm happy with that. I've seen it several times already myself.
I almost knew this by heart. So thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for letting me go as I walk in the room after being in Petaluma this evening. So this is the same presentation I'm making to all the city councils, the board of supervisors, made it 5 times to the library staff, last one today, so they're informed of what's going on. The purpose is to tell the councils and the board about the proposed amended agreement, to ask for their review and comments by November 1st, and to ask they plan on ratifying an amended agreement and appointing new members in the December-January timeframe. The background, as you know, about the current JPA established in '75 and the changes since then. And then what we're, also a bit of background, we've been doing this for a year since the mayors and council members established the committee, met a dozen times so far, lots of presentations, lots of discussion, and a very robust process. What I sometimes say is not everybody's going to get everything they want out of this, but I don't think anybody can feel they didn't have the opportunity to be heard. And that includes the labs through the survey, attendance at the conclave, presentations to the committee, same with advocates, as well as libraries, staff and management. And every meeting, public meeting, is an opportunity for further comment. What we're keeping is the one county-wide system with a dedicated funding stream, an independent government body, a little bit more independent this time around, and a commitment to collaboration. Also keeping the labs with a little more, a little bit of an increased role and a commitment to equitable services, with equitable being sort of in the eye of the beholder, I suppose. The current JPA has it defined in these ways: equal access to the facilities, materials, professional staff distributed, and then services. In those days, or these days, maybe photocopy machines and those sorts of things, but adult services and children's services. What's changing is adding all the jurisdictions and giving them 1 vote each is what's recommended. Currently, the 4 cities are the official members along with the county. The 1 vote per member is a point of contention. It was in Petaluma this evening. They are obviously favorable to that. The Board of Supervisors and the City Council from Santa Rosa each requested, said they would like to have 2 votes per member, or 2 votes for them and 1 for everybody else, because they're so proportionally different in terms of funding and population, the number of branches in Santa Rosa's case. Initial appointment split simply to create staggered terms, so if there's a lot of turnover, it doesn't all happen at one time. No alternates allowed to be appointed, which is a little unusual for this sort of thing. The commissioners would serve according to the norms of the appointing authority. At one point, we were looking at putting different kinds of language in and restrictions, but decided to leave it up to each jurisdiction to handle as they see fit. And the only restriction on the commission members would be that they must be county residents. There's no restrictions on jurisdictions having elected officials or staff or community members. They don't even have to reside in the particular jurisdiction, because the boundaries for library use don't reflect the boundaries of city governments or the county government. Full budget and employment authority, so essentially the Board of Supervisors would go out of the budget review and approval business vis-a-vis the library. Explicitly includes the power to levy taxes and exercise eminent domain. In the case of levying taxes, it would be a 2/3 vote of the commission would be required, along with whatever other hurdles one would have to jump through for a tax measure. One of the comments we heard from Santa Rosa was that levying taxes and issuing debt should require not just a 2/3 vote of the commission, but 2/3 vote of the home jurisdictions, if you will. So it would have to go back to each of the city councils, and 2/3 of them would have to vote in the Board of Supervisors to have some kind of ballot measure, for example, move forward. Back on eminent domain for a moment. Essentially, the library has that authority, even has it now, because it's a JPA, and therefore the authority is delegated. This morning I was getting all the PA announcements about the library is closing in 20 minutes, so I just wonder what's up. Anyway, what we're suggesting and what's included in here is that the library would not exercise eminent domain without the concurrence of the city or county, or they're doing it on behalf of the library. Okay, thank you. And the appeals process, there's one in place now for materials, and that would be expanded to include policies and facilities. And then the most challenging issues are about not the equal number of core hours, which we're saying each branch would have the same number, whether that be 40 or 50 or 60 or whatever it is per week. That would be equal. It would not necessarily need to be the same hours, and we're not specifying what that number would be because that would probably vary over time depending on budget. But whatever it would be, they would all be equal. The issue that's getting by far the most attention is the opportunity for the local funding of additional hours. The Board of Supervisors said that they wanted to set the threshold for that to be 2/3 of the commission would have to approve that. Santa Rosa City Council wasn't as clear in their direction, but I think it's fair to say that they would say 2/3 would be the floor. And they were seriously talked about having a 3/4 or even 4/5 vote of the commission to do that, and or some kind of a matching fund, if you will. So if it costs X dollars to open a branch on Mondays, that the funding would have to include X plus 10, 20, 30% that would go to the system as a whole. There's a real great sensitivity around social equity on this. So the board had the 2/3, Santa Rosa kind of upped the ante, and I feel like tonight at Petaluma the ante was upped even more. This could very well be a showstopper for the Petaluma City Council. They did not talk about 2/3 or 3/4 or 4/5 or matching funds. They talked about no allowance for additional hours. They did not take a vote on it. But it was my interpretation of the sense of the conversation. Tim probably picked up the same vibe. They will bring it back to their meeting on November 21st, where they will review a letter to be drafted by the city manager and amend it as they see fit, and then send it in by November 1st. But clearly that concern has been expressed and seems to only go up each meeting.
Wait, there,
October 31st, October 20, it'll come back to the Petaluma,
Back
October?
by November 1st. They addressed it at their October 21st meeting.
October 21st.
I apologize. Key changes to the strategic plan required every 10 years. The Board of Supervisors suggested that be every 5, thinking things change often enough to do that, and the City Council from Santa Rosa recognized that there are extensive efforts and costly, so we'll see where that one ends up. Nobody seems to disagree with the JPA review every 10 years instead of every 38 years, with a report of jurisdictions and maybe some amendments. Not that that couldn't happen in the meantime. An increased role for the labs with direct liaisons to the commission and annual reports from each lab, and then leases required for each of the facilities with language around collaboration on working out differences. There is another showstopper issue, at least my interpretation, showstopper issue for the city of Santa Rosa about this building. The amended JPA language essentially has the city give up all its future control for the building and the land to the library. And the city council said, they're not willing to do that for a key piece of property in a building that they own in the downtown area. I'm not clear if they want to, and they would be satisfied with keeping the current language, which is a very high threshold for them to regain control of the building. They would have to secede from the JPA, the county would have to remain in it, and then they'd have to negotiate away from the library to keep this building. And presumably, if they couldn't negotiate that successfully, then the city as the owner could sort of reclaim ownership and use. It's quite a high bar for the city. They may want to change that as we go through, but clearly what's in the amended JPA, if it stays in there, we will not have an amended JPA. At least that was my interpretation, and I think that's a fair representation for those who were there. Transition plan, I guess you'll revisit that next time. The point I want to point to here is the support from the current commission. And what we've said is, I realize it depends on what you're interested in offering if there is a new commission, how many of you might want to continue and be appointed to continue on the commission, as well as what the new commission wants. And so I think it's a little bit of a conversation that is it depends situation, but we've suggested just conceptually that at least being available for phone calls, maybe joint meetings, maybe some carryover of membership, those sorts of things might be beneficial to the new commission. Next steps, completing the roadshow, which I don't remember exact dates, but I know October 23rd in Cloverdale is the final edition. Comments by November 1st. The advisory committee is set to meet on November 14th and if necessary the 18th to hash out the differences. We're asking for ratification and appointment of new members in December and January. We are planning to bring this to the current 5 members first, because unless they unanimously agree to amend the JPA, it doesn't get amended. So in a sense, it doesn't, we could structure it differently, but it makes most sense to go to them first. So that's our plan. It was all the advisory committee, and we're still aiming for February 1st effective date, maybe a bit on the optimistic side, but that's what we're saying. That's what we're going for. So I just want to take a quick look at my notes. Just a couple other comments from the city or those who reviewed it. The Board of Supervisors agreed to, quote, strongly encourage the appointment of elected officials. The cities that we've talked to seem fine with the language that's essentially silent on the appointments. The number of commissioners I mentioned, Central Branch, I think I've covered all the other major points. The county also wants to add some language in the recitals, just reinforcing the value of the library as a community resource, as an anchor of literacy and education in the community. Phew, that's it.
I have kind of a technical question.
Sure.
The city of Santa Rosa and the city of Petaluma currently have an appointment. You might see that this is somewhat self-serving. We are still appointed. My term, I think, ends in 2015. Is there an assumption that everyone is going to need to reapply? Or since it's an amended JPA, do the current appointees from the 2 cities that currently have appointees, do they remain in place?
My understanding is that essentially the existing commission goes away, and so there would be new appointments or a process. And it would be up to each jurisdiction as to how that works, whether it be an application process or...
So is there a phrase in there that says that the current appointees go away?
No,
I don't think that's accurate, though.
I don't believe there's a phrase in there. I think that's the working assumption, at least from the staff perspective and with council. I think that's our working assumption.
I think the assumption is that the council will talk to their appointee and see if they want to stay on or not, but there's nothing that requires either of the city appointments to submit their resignation or that changes their term in the new JPA. Nothing specifically. Obviously, the 5 county appointees, since the county will now only get 1, or 2, or 3, or whatever they land on, would all submit resignations.
The other twist on this is if we go with the staggered terms, which I've heard no objection to that, and there's certain compelling logic to it, that the length of terms would be chosen by lot. And so that would essentially set whatever the term is. So in terms of whether you stay on without an action, I can't give you a definitive answer on that. I can just tell you kind of what our assumption has been is that it's sort of a blank slate for each city and the county to decide how that
That's why I raised the question, because I hadn't heard anything about it.
And we hadn't heard the questions, so I can't give you a definitive answer.
The other thing that I'm confused about, since now I'm on the place where I can ask questions instead of watching them, the increased role for labs through a direct liaison, what does that mean and how does that look and what is that?
Let me grab the actual language.
Okay.
I can answer. Some of it is that currently, although we've put labs on the agenda now, up until the point where we did that, lab members would get the same 2 minutes as anybody else. Liaisons have not just special relationship, but they have more direct access and they could speak to the commission in ways that are not limited to the public comment, and they can request items on the agenda in ways that the public probably would not have access to.
So in essence, each lab would select a liaison, and it would be up to the lab to decide whether or not they wanted that liaison to do something with the commission.
How active they would want to be, I think that would be up to each lab. And I think the idea was to encourage, the liaisons to come to the lab, to the commission meetings and participate at a level that labs have not. Generally, we've kind of gone out to them, but maybe this would be to encourage them to do as much outreach to the commission as possible.
The language in the JPA says that under the liaison section, each lab may appoint one lab member to act as a liaison to the commission per section 5C, which says lab liaisons. Each lab may appoint one lab member to act as a liaison to the library commission who shall present an annual report on the activities of the lab to the commission. So that's the language in here.
Don, I had a question about you said that most of the entities were silent on the elected officials being eligible. And was there any discussion about the ramifications of that? I mean, it would seem elected official would send their staff a lot of times because they're busy people. It just seems that that's kind of an odd addition. And I wondered if you had any discussion about that.
There was extensive discussion during the advisory committee meetings, at the 3 meetings I've now gone to with the official boards and city councils. And the Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Zane in particular, was adamant that she thinks JPAs typically work better with elected officials on the governing body as opposed to staff, and pointed to the Waste Management Agency in particular as an example of that. And I think the rest of the board members didn't feel strongly, but generally felt in that direction. That's why the board supported language to strongly encourage. The Santa Rosa City Council seemed fine with the language being silent on the issue, as did the Petaluma Council. In the advisory committee, I would say that one of the themes we heard was, this fit in with that, was local control. The notion of it's not really sort of who is the city council of, or the board of supervisors to, tell another city council who they could or couldn't appoint to represent that community's interests. And I think Bob Cox from Cloverdale sort of framed it in the way that it strikes me as the most, which is, we want the best person to be appointed to the commission, and that best person might be a city council member. That said, there's a lot of recognition that city council members tend to be spread pretty thin, and this could be quite time-consuming, although not necessarily as time-consuming as how the time you folks put in. That's really up to how the new commission decides to manage things. There is the potential to appoint staff if they wanted to, and there's also the potential to appoint either on an ad hoc or ongoing basis a standing committee. And some JPAs do have a standing committee of staff who wrestle with a lot of more technical issues, such as coming up with a long-term facilities maintenance plan, or doing some budget development work, or those sorts of things. So more work might be done by staff, even if not library staff, than the commissioners themselves.
And maybe this is brought up, but there's election cycles that would maybe cross-purpose with the elected official being on the commission.
Mm-hmm.
They may be elected out, then what happens?
Do you mind? I'm sorry.
No, please.
I was just going to say, so there was a previous incarnation of the JPA that had appointments for 1 year, and then they would just continue with approval as opposed to having a set term. And that got changed to actual 4-year terms, and there was also a proposal at one point to allow for alternates, which is why Don says no alternates. That actually got taken out after public comment that was quite opposed to having alternates and didn't think it was appropriate for this commission.
Thank you.
So it's been discussed a lot.
I watch Santa Rosa can't even agree on who should be vice mayor. Well, how are they going to get around this?
They have one now?
Yeah, I'm appointed by Santa Rosa.
Yeah,
but not.
But I'm
not
saying
an
is
elected
that
official.
an elected official, and this group is electing
Um,
you, gee whiz, I feel like that's my job. I don't understand why they think an elected official is going to be better for this thing.
Okay. I also know that you brought up, thankfully, at the Board of Supervisors meeting, the idea of the 10-year strategic plan, and that the, speaking from a standpoint of a commissioner, I agree with what you said. That was the deal about a 5-year plan is going to cost money, twice as much money for a strategic plan as a 10-year plan. And so I don't know if we have language that basically demands or recommends a 5-year plan, just because of the tight finances that the library has to work in. It doesn't seem reasonable to add yet another demanded expense to the library's operation.
And from the advisory committee's perspective, that's why the language says at least every 10 years. So it really leaves it to the commission. And that was another one of the themes, was don't tie their hands too tightly, let them make decisions for the future that are best up to their discretion.
Okay, so that, and I haven't heard, how do people feel about the equity issue?
I think that this commission should send back a message saying that we recommend taking it out. I think we should not have disparity of service. I feel very strongly that the underlying foundation of our library system is equity of service, and if we allow disparity of service, we start, as your city councilwoman put it, vulcanizing the system. And I think there's a huge problem. We're going to give the new commission the ability to fundraise on a system-wide level, on a county-wide level, to perhaps even have a new revenue stream through taxes. But then we're going to say, but you know, if anybody else wants to, they can open their branch longer, and that's going to completely hamstring their ability to actually fundraise on a county-wide level, because if your branch is open the number of hours you want, you're not going to vote for a tax increase so that the entire county can catch up with you. And I envision a system where the disparity of service becomes entrenched. I also think, and I've talked to Commissioner May about this, and to my friends of the library about this, that it has the potential, if the friends are going to be looked to provide the funding, providing funding for a capital project or a program that is a specific and done one-time expense, is a different proposition than asking them to pay ongoing salaries and benefits and retirement and health care and all of those other things.
One of the members of our friends said, do we get to be on the interview committee?
No, I mean, I feel very, very strongly that the disparity of service, I'm sorry I'm saying this to an almost empty room, but that the disparity of service is a terrible idea, and although we do not get to vote on the new JPA, our disapproval of a particular part of it carries almost no weight at all. I would ask that we send back the message that the commission thinks it's a bad idea and would like to take it out.
Can I add, I don't think anybody ever talks about behind costs. So if you're open, do you expect deliveries? Do you expect all these other services to happen because you're...
Yeah, that's part of,
That's actually part of it.
That's part of it, that would be covered. And there are various, Don can respond, but there are several things that are being, first of all, there's proposals that in order for it to happen, it has to be approved by the commission. And Santa Rosa's idea was that it's as much as maybe 4/5 of the commission would have to approve it. So that's, there are major stumbling blocks even if it happens, but I think it's important to head it off.
The calculation of what it would cost to open a branch. So if somebody came and said, we want to fundraise to open, Sebastopol additional hours, the commission, the next commission, not us, will have to come up with a formula and put in the bylaws so that everybody knows in advance how they're going to calculate those costs. It has to be for a set period of time, at least a year. I think they'll probably come up with at least wanting a 2-year commitment if they're going to take the time and trouble to structure. The union will have to be consulted. I mean, the bylaws of the commission, of the new commission, are going to contain all of the rules for that, if it's allowed. I don't think it should be allowed.
Well, in Santa Rosa, City Council at their recent meeting, I think had a lot of concern about an area that's a wealthy area that has the ability to raise funds easily, just raising them for their local branch, and wanted to have some kind of a mechanism where some percent of those funds have to go to support the entire countywide system, because I think they're very uncomfortable with the idea that, some areas of the county, because of the wealth in that area, are going to have, this level of service, and other areas, won't. And, I do think that a county-wide system, one of the great things about our library is that, it's available to all our communities, and not just, the wealthy areas. So I think it does represent a fundamental shift.
I agree, and also the wanting to have 2 representatives for the city of Santa Rosa and then 2 representatives for the county. I think people who think that way are missing the point of what the Library Commission and what a countywide library system is all about also. That I don't see the Petaluma representative thinking only in terms of the Petaluma branch. I think we all think in terms of the whole system and what's good for the whole system. So having 2 extra commissioners on the commission does not make sense to me. And I brought this up, I had some friends who were saying, well, yes, Santa Rosa's bigger and they have more money, they should have more voice. But I said, well, does Santa Rosa feel like it hasn't been well represented to date? Because they have been equally represented. So I have a concern about the additional commissioners.
And I would note the current JPA actually only has 10 commissioners. The proposal for more is not been really vetted or discussed by the committee, except at one point Santa Rosa sort of floated the idea of proportional representation and got booed off the stage.
Well, I think that that was an example of compromise, because it was the county was after more, and then the person from Santa Rosa said, 1 jurisdiction, 1 vote, and that solved that.
What was interesting, Tim, to my recollection, I actually remember this very clearly because being a county employee, nobody from the county suggested that we get additional representatives.
No.
It was people from the
Santa
committee,
Rosa.
from the committee, I don't remember who it was, said the county, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't Santa Rosa, 3 to 5. And we were looking at each other from the county saying, where'd that come from? And it wasn't from us. And so it played itself out that we are where we are today.
I don't know how we get, so far as the mayor of Petaluma helped me with this at the last meeting. The sense of what I'm getting is that people are uncomfortable, strongly uncomfortable with with inequity, with equity of service. They're strongly uncomfortable with the concept of inequity of service. People are uncomfortable about the Santa Rosa idea of increasing, or the Board of Supervisors idea of increasing 1 per person.
So those are the 2 major issues that the Healdsburg Lab
Would-
to the city council.
Would the Healdsburg Lab be less upset, less opposed to the new JPA if it did not have the disparity of service?
I think that would certainly be a big issue. The other one is the composition of the commission.
They don't, well, right now the composition of the commission is 1 from each city and 1 for the city and 1 for the Board of Sups. The suggestion of difference is not.
You mean the elected officials?
Elected officials.
Oh, but they could have that now, the elected official, the current JPA allows for it. I'm not.
The elected officials issue was voted on explicitly twice, and on the first vote it was 10 to 1 to allow electeds. On the second it was 9 to 2. That one I don't see a lot to give on, just based on the comments. The three jurisdictions we've been through so far, two have said stay as it is, stay silent. The third said encourage elected officials. If that's any indication, that's where the winds are blowing. It looks like elected officials will be.
So I have a hypothetical question about that. So if an elected official is appointed to the commission and they find themselves spread thin and unable to participate, and so they have a lot of stuff done by their staff, are they then going to pay their staff out of their budget, or are they going to at some point say, well, the library budget should be paying for my staff time because it's library business? Because to date, we do not do that.
There's one other danger that I heard it's a brand new one, a whole new danger page to me. And that is this issue of, I guess maybe because it's somewhere in my heart of hearts, I see a tax election coming up from the commission at some point. And currently, our restriction for the commission being able to do a tax election is that we need the approval of the Board of Supervisors. What we've, in essence, done by what Santa Rosa is proposing is increased it to 9 city councils that would need to approve at a 2/3 vote to be able to put a tax election on the ballot for the library. And that makes the bar even higher because they're each going to have their own set of priorities as to what, we don't want the library to do it this year because we need sports fields, or we don't want it this year because we need to fix our waste management system or something. So that one feels like one that's really scary.
Let me clarify at least my understanding of what the 2/3 meant. My understanding is that the 2/3 requirement, as it stands now in the current language, is 2/3 of the commission must vote to support a tax increase before it can move forward. The interpretation of what Santa Rosa said was 2/3 of the originating jurisdictions must approve. It can't just be their representatives on the commission. It must go back to the Board of Supervisors and the city councils, who don't need a 2/3 vote on each council to approve it. You just need 2/3 of them. So in this case, it would be 7 of the jurisdictions, because if you count the board, there's 10 to vote. So you need 7 to get to 2/3.
So it makes the bar harder.
Right, it would never happen. That would never happen.
I mean, unless the people of the cities were really organized and would go to their city councils and say, yes, vote for this. Any, city, 4 cities could say, we don't want it. And then our one hope that's been, how can I say this? If you look back to the strategic plan of X number of years ago, it's identified that our funding is completely and totally inadequate. And that's an issue that the new commission needs to really tackle as soon as they can. And you're putting even a higher bar to be able to have that happen. That one scares me.
I agree with you, Tim, but I think right now we have to give feedback and comments on the things that are actually in the proposed joint powers agreement.
But we're not going to have a chance
Yeah, we are.
unless through you.
Well, and anyone who wants can come, November, I have it in my calendar.
14th and 18th.
Okay,
November
I just wanna-
14th and 18th, round up everybody to come object to that.
That red flag
Yes.
started waving for me when I first heard that.
Absolutely
My
agree.
interpretation is that would be a showstopper issue for some members on the Santa Rosa City Council. I don't know that I would say it's the council as a whole, but it was very strongly felt by some that
Right.
it should be the originating jurisdictions that need to take this vote.
But then there is not really a library commission if they're saying we have to make that decision.
For there are certain issues, issuing debt and raising taxes were the 2 threshold issues that some of the members felt were of such a significant nature that it would need to go back to the originating jurisdictions. That's not to say it's a showstopper for the council. The only one I felt was a pretty clear showstopper was around the central branch.
And I think that the view of the council members, it was specifically tied to having an appointed person as opposed to an elected official. And that it was around that discussion. That if you had an elected official, then the ability to, taxes, but also the indebtedness piece was somehow they'd been elected and not an inappropriate kind of amount of authority. but that if you are having appointed people, that's where, I would say 2 of the Santa Rosa City Council people, I think, kind of seem pretty strong about
That's
that.
'cause they have not read the current JPA that gives us the authority to issue bonds should we wish to, not that we ever have or would, but we actually have that authority right now.
And perhaps they've missed the action in Washington DC.
Well, and perhaps an alternative, if the red flag doesn't get changed and it does go through, is to maintain that it stays with the Board of Supervisors to approve a tax initiative, which is a representative of the city, of the body. But part of my concern with this whole process is balkanization. And, as Helena said, we all serve here for the county and not as a representative of our district or our city per se. I mean, we raise those things. But once we begin to get a representative from each city, we're opening up that ability to say, this is what I want for my city. And I'm scared of that.
And I think that's more likely with elected officials.
Yes, I think so too.
Who, because I think we all view ourselves as library commission first, and we think about what's good for the commission and for all the libraries.
But I think,
Exactly.
right, but I think,
Right now, we're having a fight with the union. All of a sudden, an elected official says, well, wait a minute, let's not be doing this.
and the current JPA allows for elected, it doesn't say it. I mean, we are mimicking, the proposed JPA mimics the current JPA. The current JPA does not prohibit elected officials. It does not prohibit staff. It says, basically leaves it open to whoever you want, but the structure is 4-year terms tends not to be elected officials, and no alternates, I think, will also tend not to be elected officials. So the structure of the current JPA, which is being carried over into the new JPA, and the thing is, if an entity should be able to appoint who they think is the best person, their community can show up and object strenuously if they don't want an elected official appointed. And the community can show up and support an elected official if that's what they want. But I think it makes sense to allow the community and public of each community to...
Well, my interpretation of being at most of those meetings is that this was a compromise that we don't want to disturb too much if we can help it.
So
to keep it silent.
in terms of, do you have kind of what our key feedback? I know you got key feedback from each of the others you've been to.
Yeah,
Do you feel like you kind of have
I think I
ours
did.
now?
I think particularly the concern on equity is
Big.
the big, strong one. I'm putting together a document. So far, I've only completed it for the county because I want to make sure I've got it right, as you know, with the city of Santa Rosa, and then not sure what I'm going to do about Petaluma since they'll be putting their letter together. I'm trying to keep kind of an updated rolling, here's what we're hearing from people, and I'm really limiting that to the jurisdictions in particular, because those are the ones that are going to have to wrestle with this and iron it out. They're the ones who have to vote on it. So,
The other thing that I would say to the rest of the commissioners, and I know that at least 2 of you have already been to a city council, and that I know that Healdsburg you've been active in the Healdsburg activity, but if you feel strong, I mean, we don't have a vote, but your city council does, or your board of supervisors eventually. I mean, they've already spoken, but it really does have an effect to have people in the audience who speak to a certain issue. And I recommend that if you want to organize and get the feelings of your lab and your friends, and that when the city councils hear these discussions, they hear from the people who are closest to the library.
Also, I know one of your city council members called me just to
Yeah.
chat about what was going on, and I'm more than happy, having been at all of the JPA committees, if any of the council want to chat with me, I'm happy to do it.
What is the schedule for off the top of your...
off the top of my head,
When's Healdsburg?
tomorrow is Katati. and their meeting starts at 7 o'clock. Thursday is the mayors and council members have, I believe it's a quarterly meeting where they get together and talk about a variety of issues. This is, I think, their primary issue of substance on the agenda. So that'll be interesting because an opportunity to hear kind of the cross-city conversation, although the time is quite limited. We're in Sebastopol on the 15th. We're in Windsor, or I won't be with the city managers handling that one, on the 16th. We have Healdsburg and Sonoma on the 21st. I believe Runner Park on the 22nd and Cloverdale on the 23rd, and I sure hope I haven't left anybody out. And I'm also telling everybody, do not rely on anything that I tell you in the sense of, I don't control the city council agendas. Well, I have every reason to believe that schedule will be what we follow. It's really their posting is the place to check it out.
Okay, you've been great. Thank you
Thank
very,
you
very
very
much.
Don, you really have been great all the way along.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much, Don.
Thanks for allowing me to go early.
Early.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
folks,
this is early.
we have closed session coming up, and it's,
Can we take a quick break?
yes, you can take a break.
Okay.
Should we go right to closed session? or
Well,
do
we have one more
something
thing.
here?
Wait, there's
Do you
more.
have,
We have the interim,
do you have,
we have to do the insurance coverage quote.
we have to do the insurance coverage. Let's take a quick 5-minute break
Okay.
and let that go. Okay. All right. We have a question, you folks. We would love to hear your proposal, but, did you hear the but? Is there something in there specifically that you would like direction from us immediately about, and we could do the rest of it later, like at the next meeting? By the way, things are so wonderful. Anyway.
No, I don't see anything totally immediate, aside from perhaps not having to bring this performance management detail level report and have a more general summary of where we stand. Right now, it's broken out by individual supervisor and how many people they're responsible for and how many reports have been done for each person. And
Can I give you some back? Can I speak? Sure. So we requested that initially because there was, I think, not only a culture of not doing evaluations, but there was actual resistance to it.
I think you've made a culture change,
And
maybe we could let go of the...
If you feel like it's changed, because it's a high priority for the commission, and that was the way we were able to indicate it was a high priority.
Right. And if anything, I guess we're asking that perhaps during this time when people are sort of doubled up on duties and so on, that it not be such a high priority for you. And I do believe you've made somewhat of a culture shift by asking for it for this amount of time, that I feel like it just is an added, it's something that seems like it could be let go at this point.
How about a compromise of, we get it with detail, but on a quarterly instead of monthly? And so just once a quarter it gets compiled, so it's less burden.
Quarterly, but with detail, instead of, as we suggest, quarterly without detail.
Right.
I feel that, I mean, this is me. If we're getting a quarterly report that says 80% of the people are done or whatever, I don't need to know whether Matilda has done her...
Oh, Matilda, she's the worst.
Yeah.
She never does her performance reports.
Right. But the bottom line is we want them to keep happening. And so if we get some sort of report that says they aren't, which we're hoping there's an honesty in, then that's what we want.
You see it monthly, right? You see these reports monthly, it's just that you don't give them to us quarterly.
And we don't want to have to ask Patrick in particular to compile them monthly.
I was going to suggest do a quarterly report, and by exception, if there's something that pops up to you.
Well, we can check in with Patrick and see if anyone's particularly, Matilda is really blowing it still.
Yeah, well, they've been naughty.
Yeah.
My only concern is that it looks like the number of overdue items has increased. Am I looking at this wrong? Are we talking about the performance management? So it says percentage of total participants, number, and prior month. So has it gone up or down?
So total overdue items has increased, and I think as we mentioned in there, that's due in large measure because of the timing, most people had various kinds of reports due in July and August, and there was a significant effort made on the part of managers to complete those. But the number, frankly, is just overwhelming for them. So we're looking to see if we can't spread that out a bit, but it's just where that numbers happen to fall for July and August that I believe is why we have an update in these items.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. So I know you're not going to want to hear what I think, but I don't want to see us backslide on this at all. I know they're time consuming, and I think that whole process probably should be looked at to be a little less cumbersome, and maybe that's a way out of it. But I've had it so strongly ingrained in me from working at the county, and I know not every department over there did this, but our department, took what the Board of Supervisors wanted and ran with it, which was to be current on our evaluations. And it really helps to deal with issues that later become bigger issues. And so I really don't want to see it backslide, because then it's out of control again, and then you kind of have to, start over again with people.
I guess we were just taking a look at the whole gamut of stuff that we do and since the commission asked what you could do to make life easier during this interim period, we told you. So that's it.
And I guess my view is that if the reporting is burdensome, going to reporting quarterly, I think is fine. And if less detail, but I feel that, and again, it's probably the culture of Bank of America and frankly every bank I've ever worked at. I mean, if you don't do people's annual reviews as a manager, as a senior vice president, as an executive vice president, you're out of a job, because, I mean, it's such a huge deal to make sure that everybody's getting appropriate feedback, and so I think it's really important that it happens.
And I would agree with that. It's really important that it happens. If the review process is so onerous that people can't get it done and their other work, then I think the review process needs to be changed rather than just not doing them as often.
Those are all nice ideas, but for now, what's our direction? We want quarterly with detail, or Helena still wants monthly?
Well, I just don't want to see it fall back. So I'm willing to accept quarterly with detail as long as the reviews continue to be done.
Okay.
And
I know that you all come from these other places. I come from one other one called education. And we found that the quarterly reviews the annual reviews were really important for the people for whom there were problems. But the people who had been around for a long time and were basically still doing what they did well wasn't quite as important. Do you understand what I'm saying there about, we have a staff that's been around forever at this library, and there may be some people on the staff who actually need significant intervention to improve or be gone. But
I don't agree with that. I know we meant to have this short, but I think that if someone is doing a stellar job, that having that positive feedback is just as important as to the person that needs coaching. I mean, I really think that having a feedback loop is really important to people.
okay, I agree.
We're not disputing that.
No.
We're just asking that the reporting requirements be made less onerous.
Yeah,
so that we can have some slack during this
I would
time.
put it this way. I am more than happy for you guys not to have to do more work.
Right.
Don't tell the staff we've stopped looking, so they'll keep doing the reports.
Well, they watched the video.
No one's stopping looking at the requirements for evaluations. We have
Oh,
an
I
HR
heard
department that looks at that and that reminds people regularly when they have evaluations coming due and asks for them. So that's what we can do, and that's what we always intend to keep doing.
I heard two things from you. One was the evaluation process was cumbersome, and
Did I say the evaluation process was cumbersome? I didn't think I said that, actually.
okay, so then I misheard. So
Yeah, no, I'm not that wrapped up in the evaluation process. They can always be tweaked, but
Okay. All right, so quarterly with detail, keeping it going. Okay, and the rest of it, I think we need to move into closed session.
insurance.
Oh, the insurance thing, which one is that?
This is just for information though, right? We're not
Right.
having to actually make.
Yes, you asked last year, I
Right.
believe that you received this estimate a month ahead.
Yep. And then we
So that you
actually-
weren't in any way
Okay.
blindsided by the
Right.
cost on the day that you needed to make the decision. And in fact, this current insurance does expire on the exact date of your next meeting. So you'll need to be ready
Okay.
and willing and able to vote
Right.
at that time.
And I have a question on this.
Go ahead.
We're doing the insurance one. So what did we budget for insurance this year? I can't remember.
It went. Well,
We'll find out here in a second.
it's a decrease of $1,000 from last year, so.
Yeah, since it's a decrease from last year, then it probably has been
Yeah, I mean,
budgeted for.
it's close.
When did insurance ever go down?
Well,
According to the ads, if you have a little thing in your car, it'll go down. Car insurance. I have a question. The next meeting is on a Wednesday, correct? And is that because of the conference in San Diego?
Yes.
Okay.
Long Beach.
Long Beach. Oh, Long Beach.
Just to respond to your question, we
Yes.
budgeted 70,000 for the.
Okay.
do this one, right, for our closed session?
Go.
Okay, and we have a appointment
November 6th.
for the Sebastopol Library Advisory Board.
That was supposed to be dropped from the, oh, okay, we're going to continue that to next month.
Okay. So there's one other thing I wanted to do. We have this tradition of the lab notes. What items do we feel need to be passed on to the labs in the lab notes? Since I wasn't here for most of the meeting, I would say the only thing is there was concern about the disparate services proposal.
I think that what the labs need to hear are that are in the process of hiring an interim CFO, that we did approve on a very limited basis, Sandy Cooper. I mean, that's out there, we should tell them what we did.
And not to exceed 40 hours on that?
Not to exceed 40 hours.
That in there?
For
and-
litigation services.
Yeah, specifically for fact-finding litigation.
And that we've also approved the initial process for finding a new director.
Okay, any other, do we want,
And we hate disparate service.
And also, I think next month, there will be on the agenda, just information about the reduction in hours and costs, because people might be interested in attending next month.
and Patrick?
I'm sorry, I may have missed this when you were finishing up about the liability insurance. Is it possible, if you have questions about what's in your packet, maybe get those questions to me within the next 2 weeks so that I can be in touch with the broker and just, be prepared to have that information for you on November 6th?
Sounds good. And so are you including the disparate services upset?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we are now pursuant to Government Code 54957. We are going to, 54958. We are going to meet in closed session for agency labor negotiations. And is there any public comment before we go to closed session? We will, since there is no public here, we will be reporting out from closed session upstairs in the conference room. We will not come back down. Okay?